Chapter 864. Not every clergyman's name would be holy in the hearts of the people. Perhaps Duque was more famous in many fields, but in terms of devotion to the holy light, compassion, salvation of the soul and saving countless lives, Duque was no match for Alonso's fail. Almost as soon as Duque mentioned the name, nearly 10,000 people of the Rotterdam kingdom, apart from the guards who had a mission, all started to kneel. Duque continued, without Archbishop Fail's teachings, perhaps countless people in the world would still be on the verge of depravity and corruption, allowing evil to take advantage of them, allowing greed and sin to dominate the souls of the people. Without Archbishop Fail's holy light, we wouldn't even be able to find weapons to fight against the Calamity army. When Duque said that, the elves could not help but recall the scene when Duque and Queen Sylvanas worked together to defeat the evil illusion of the Lich King. They also thought of their loved ones who had their souls imprisoned and their corpses desecrated after being slaughtered by the Calamity army. They thought of the holy light that destroyed evil, and suddenly felt a heartfelt admiration for the name Alonso's Fail, which was once unfamiliar to them. Unknowingly, even the elves started to kneel. At this moment, the golden light from the soul coin had already extended to Duque's entire body. From afar, Duque looked like a huge golden torch. Duque's eyes were smiling and he said loudly, "I am not a priest. I am not qualified to bestow the holy light with the name of a clergyman. However, as the inheritor of the holy light of the former archbishop, I am still willing to give the highest blessing to the two majesties who hope to guide the people with the path of holy light. Bless you, Your Majesty Menethil. Bless you, Your Majesty Windrunner." In the next moment, dazzling golden light extended from Duke's left and right hands, and even the bodies of the two queens who had stretched out their hands flickered with golden light. 3 seconds later, 2 beams of golden light shot into the sky, straight into the clouds. Their bodies were bathed in the holy light. The two queens smiled at Duque before looking at each other. They took out a crown from the holy box that they had long opened and put it on themselves. Monarchical power was not bestowed by God, nor was it bestowed by heaven. Instead, it was bestowed by the will of the people. Looking at the golden lily crown on Queen Kalia's head, then looking at the thorny flower crown on Sylvanas's head that symbolized revenge, both humans and elves raised their heads, waiting for their queen's declaration. The two queens stood up at the same time. Kalia was the first to raise the holy book in her hand, and her gentle but firm voice resounded in all directions. "I, Kalia Menethil, will purify the land of Lordaeron that has been polluted by the plague, and return everyone a fertile and green world." In the next second, Kalia put away the holy book and raised her scepter. "Also, I swear that for the rest of my life, I will punish the traitor who killed the late King Tyrrhenas, my brother Arthas, with the holy light, and let his soul repent for 10,000 years in hell." Almost at the same time, Sylvanas also made her declaration in the Elven language. Because she used the language of the wind, it was very miraculous that even though she and Kalia's declarations were said at the same time, their voices did not affect each other at all. Instead, they were very clear and directly floated into the ears of every elf. Sylvanas stood on a high ground and raised her bow high up in the air. "I, Sylvanas Windrunner, will rebuild the great elven kingdom. Not only will I clear every plague in the kingdom, but I will also rebuild Silvery Moon City. I declare that I will also lead the Sin Dorii, who are seeking revenge for their fallen compatriots, to exact the cruelest revenge on Darkin Delethil and the other former members of the Silver Moon Council who betrayed their people, as well as the former Sun King Anastrian Sunstrider, as well as the Death Knight Arthas and the Lich King Nazul who personally destroyed Quell the Loss. Only by letting the souls of the traitors burn in the flames of hell for billions of years. Only by letting the great Sindorii once again stand at the top of the world's races. Only then will our revival be complete." The same stirring speech, the same unwavering oath. The two queens' declarations completely ignited the passion in the hearts of the people, stirring up the desire in their hearts for the revival of their race and kingdom. After a short pause of half a second, the entire mountaintop erupted into wild cheers that shook the earth and mountains at the same time. "Long live Her Majesty Kalia! Long live Her Majesty Sylvanas! For the rise of Lordaeron once again! For the true rebirth of Sindorii, whose tears were flying, whose soul was it that was screaming?" Two races that had both experienced countless hardships and the threat of death at this moment, crossed the boundaries of their borders, crossed the boundaries of their races and let out the same cheer for the same goal. Because they had been suppressed for so long they had once felt despair. Because they had once been lost and could not find a way out. So when the new queen became a flag with both material and spiritual significance, standing in the center of their vision, they completely fell into a frenzy. Mograine and Abendus wiped away their tears. They had found a person who could continue their loyalty. Lilith wiped away her tears. After being oppressed for so long, the Windrunner finally did not have to be bullied for no reason by the stubborn mages. Riadaline, Lor, Themar and Hadron were all wiping away their tears. They finally saw hope for the kingdom to rise again. Perhaps the two kingdoms were still very weak now, but with the cooperation of the alliance, as long as the evil demon leader Archimond was eliminated, and in time, the kingdom that had once almost fallen to the point of extinction would definitely rise again. Among the guests, the former elven prince Kale, that was also impressively among them. There was no jealousy, no hatred. Kale, that's also wiped away his tears lightly and clapped his hands vigorously. Solarian Caponia, do you see that? In the face of difficulties I see pessimism and despair. However, Sylvanas only has the spirit of never giving up, and the direction and method to solve the difficulties. I am not as good as her. I believe that she is the true queen who can lead the elves out of despair and hardship, not me. Although the two beautiful astrologers agreed with what Kale, that said from the bottom of their hearts, their mouths were filled with bitterness. Of course, not every being would give the best wishes for the two queens' ascension. For example, the Sun King, who was in the secret chamber under the ruins of Lordaeron, was venting his anger crazily. The dark flames burned any living being that could move. Even the former members of the Silver Moon Council who were loyal to him, and the current high-level liches, kept a respectful distance from him. Traitor. Despicable thief. Sylvanas, do you think you can steal my power and status like this? Do you think you have become a true king just because you proclaimed yourself king? No, I'm not done with you. And Kale, that's you useless piece of trash. You actually watched as your father's power was stolen? You don't deserve to be my son. Chapter 865. Thousands of kilometers away, Kale, that seemed to sense something and suddenly felt a chill. Carponia asked in concern, "What's wrong?" "Nothing. I was just thinking that my father might be very unhappy to see this." Kale, that smiled bitterly. Although he wanted to leave this place as soon as possible and escape from this political whirlpool, sometimes he couldn't do it even if he wanted to. Duque also wanted to help him escape, but unfortunately Lord Themar and the other higher-ups insisted that the official exit of the former king's representative would make Sylvanas' ascension more legitimate. This would certainly embarrass Kale, but the former prince accepted everything calmly. This made Kale, supporters indignant. Looking at the two queens sitting on their thrones on the stage and Duque sitting between them like stars surrounding the moon, Solarian and the other elven experts felt an indescribable jealousy. Alexandros Mograine and Lor Themar Theron took the stage respectively and read out the policies that the new king would implement after ascending to the throne on behalf of their queens, receiving cheers from the people again and again. The more this happened, the more uncomfortable Kale, supporters felt. The resentment in their hearts was stuck in their chests and they couldn't vent it. Even Solarian, who was used to seeing the world and felt that she could bear all this mentally, forced herself to come to the venue, felt like she was going crazy. She was extremely glad that the two irascible fellows, Solidre and Segunar, weren't here. Suddenly, an unexpected person approached Kale. He was wearing a hood, but it didn't cover his face. In the cheering crowd, he seemed so out of place. Duque. Unexpectedly, as soon as Duke left the rostrum, the other side came over. Kale, was first stunned, then pleasantly surprised. On such an occasion, it undoubtedly represented a rare and valuable support. "There's no need to get up. We'll just sit and talk." Duque smiled. Despite their dissatisfaction, Solarian and Carponia immediately stood up and gave up a chair for Duque. Duke took the responsibility and sat on Kale, right-hand side, allowing the two radiant moon astromancer beauties to serve on his side. Sitting down, Duque spoke again. "The feeling of losing glory must be terrible, right?" Duque was so straightforward that Caponia almost exploded, but Solarian, who was more composed, held her down. Kale, didn't suppress his emotions and allowed the pain to appear on his handsome face. Yes, I used to think that I could bear all of this, but I realized that my temperament wasn't strong enough to bear such a heavy blow. I'm okay, but I'm afraid my followers will be a little unstable. I won't say any more useless words of encouragement. I just want to say that all intelligent beings in this world will have a battle with Archerons, the commander of the Burning Legion. Duque's words made Kale, that's suddenly agitated. He gripped the armrest of the chair tightly and turned half of his body around. Duque, you mean? Duque lowered his voice and said in an extremely solemn tone, if that day comes, will you join? When the time comes, I will go, Cervantes will go, and Mograine will go. But let me say this first. That's Archerons with at least half of his strength. I can't guarantee that anyone, including me, will come back alive. It wasn't just Kale, that's. Even the two beautiful astromancers behind him were so excited that they couldn't stop trembling. All the depression from before and the resentment that was heavy like a mountain had vanished without a trace at this moment. Other than Duque, no one had ever been willing to truly understand the feelings of a group of traitors like them. They still loved their motherland from the bottom of their hearts, longed to save their compatriots from suffering, and were eager to wash away their shame and prove themselves to the world with glory. But there was no chance. They originally thought that going to the door of darkness would be equivalent to being exiled for a few years. At most, they would suffer a few years of disdain, and their situation would be better when they came back. But now Duque had given them a better shortcut. How could they not be ecstatic? Death. For traitors, like them, this was no longer the biggest concern. In the end, it was the more cautious Solarian who bowed deeply to Duque and added, I have a question. Before I ask, please forgive my narrow-mindedness, Your Excellency Marcus. I don't mind. Duque waved his hand. Solarian uncontrollably rubbed her skirt along her thighs. If Your Highness Kale, that joins us in the expedition against the Archerons, will we have an official identity? Solarian. That was a little shocked and angry. He didn't expect his follower to ask such a question. In his imagination he could be a hired thug. If he was lucky enough to come back alive and Duque could be merciful and wash away the shame with him, then he would be endlessly grateful. Wasn't Solarian's question a disguised form of blackmail? Duque smiled. I've always been like this. If others treat me with sincerity, I will treat them with sincerity. The expedition against a peerless expert like the Archerons is a matter of life and death to begin with. Every member who dares to join the expedition should be respected by the world. Therefore, as long as you join, it must be as an official. And at the expedition ceremony, Kale, you will be among the Alliance's generals. This is my promise. Hiss. The three elves all gasped. They didn't know how to describe their feelings at all. The fall of Cuel Salis and the destruction of Silvermoon City could not be attributed to Duque. Kale, had knelt down out of kinship, so it was hard for him to blame Duque for not coming out earlier. Duque had explained later that he was unable to gain control of the Sunwell branch, and that Duque did not have the capital to fight against the Sun King. After all, there were all kinds of strange things to be blamed. The Sun King could only blame himself for ruthlessly refusing to join the alliance at the beginning, chasing away the Alliance ambassador, Bolvar, and bowing down to evil in order to continue his existence. But now, Duque had so generously opened the door and given them a chance to redeem themselves. One had to know that for the smooth political transition, as someone close to Cervantes, Duque should have nailed Kale, to the pillar of shame instead of trying to whitewash Kale, Unable to suppress the excitement in her heart, Solarian actually knelt down on one knee and spoke in the Elven language. The general meaning of these words was that she had gauged the heart of a gentleman with her own mean measure, which was a serious insult to Duque's character. In order to protect Duque's reputation as long as Kale, could restore his reputation this time, she was willing to work like a slave for Duque. At this moment, Duque was dumbfounded. Chapter 866. If it was in the future where ancient gods were everywhere and demigods were as common as dogs, a radiant moon astromancer might just be a rare elite. However, in this era where the third battle of the Dark Portal had yet to end, it was a little too much to ask a radiant moon astromancer to work for him. Duque instinctively wanted to refuse, but the system notification told him that this was a matter of faction prestige selection. Faction prestige selection was when two opposing forces were fighting. Which one would you choose? Once you chose one side, don't expect the other side to treat you well. The higher your reputation on one side, the more the other side would want to tear you to pieces. Miraculously, when Duque went to find out what the other side was, the system elf told Duque that it was unknown. What a mess. This was the first time Duque had heard of such opposing factions. However, since he had decided to help Kaizi, there was no reason for him to give up halfway. After all, Solarian was a famous boss in the Eye Fortress in the future. At the very least, she had much more room for growth than Wuxia. Moreover, when Duque saw Solarian's nervous and uneasy eyes, and thought of the customs of the elves, Duque more or less understood what was going on. Mystics were particular about equivalent exchange. In the Dalajan, exchange was usually in the form of selling one's body to serve the Dalajan for a long period of time. Mage apprentices of low birth would mostly sell their labor and join the Dalajan Mage Guild in order to pay their tuition fees. In the High Elf Society, which was more particular about bloodlines and family inheritance, the price of teaching magic, even if it was just taking them in as a mage apprentice, was usually a lifetime of loyalty to a certain family. Becoming an elf of a certain bloodline meant that one would be marked for life. This was also why the loyal followers of the prince had never thought of changing sides. Duque had originally thought that Sylvanas would become the queen and replace Kaizi, who had been the king for a while in history. Duque had decided to help Kaizi out of a desire to make up for it. Who would have thought that the elf's way of thinking was even more rigid? Solarian wanted to use her status as a radiant moon to help Kale, that's who is also a radiant moon, have a bright future. Based on the difference in strength, it was the followers who thought they had the advantage. Duque was a little speechless. That's not good. If this gets out, they'll think that I stole your follower with my power. Unexpectedly, Kale, that's dropped an even bigger bomb. He also left his seat and bowed deeply to Duque with Caponia. No, actually, Solarian's intention is also my intention. As sinners who betrayed their own people, if they could slightly redeem their reputation and reduce the guilt in their hearts, that would be the greatest redemption for them. If we're lucky enough to survive after fighting the Arch-Herons, I hope you can have me and these elites who have lost their homeland follow you. Duque almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Faster, thief. Is this even worse than a chicken on the ground? Although I also know that in history you were betrayed by your loved ones, forced into madness and despair, and even nailed to the pillar of shame with your subordinates, but you, a dignified former prince, becoming my subordinate like this. It's not good. Speaking of which, if I bring you out, of course it'll be cool. Tui tui. Duque was very embarrassed. But at this time it wasn't just Kale and his servants who bowed to him. Even the few high elves in the VIP seats bowed to Duque. These old elves weren't strong, but they represented several ancient families. They also helped to plead with Duque. Kale, that's made a big mistake, but considering that he did it out of kinship, we can still understand. It would be a pity if a kind and responsible genius like him died in disgrace. Since Sir Marcus has this idea after Kale, that proves himself, you might as well accept them as followers. Under everyone's persuasion, Duque could only reluctantly say that everything would have to wait until after the sniping of Archimonde. Duque was waiting for news from the other side of the endless sea. Not only did he have to wait for news from Ronan, but he also had to wait for news from Jaina and even from the orcs. Everything needed time to ferment and it couldn't be rushed. In the following days, because he knew that the Scourge army was no longer led by the Lich King and Arthas, Duque was at ease and let the Alliance organize a few large-scale attacks. Unfortunately, it wasn't complete. Because the entire Silver Pine Forest was filled with endless werewolves, they didn't dare to rashly attack the Alterac Mountains, and they couldn't deal with the zombies at the bottom of Lordamere Lake. The southern front was almost at a standstill. But with Lothar's Griffin Legion, Old General Haas's Mountain Eagle Knights, and Bulang Bronzebeard's Mechanized Dwarven Legion, a total of 150,000 soldiers, the defense was stable. Duque gathered his army in the eastern Plaguelands, and took advantage of the last opportunity before winter to launch a fierce attack on the western Plaguelands. This was a grand attack that gathered all the elite troops that Duque could muster. Mograine and Abendis's Scarlet Cross Legion, which had 150,000 soldiers after expansion. Sidan Dathrahan's 60,000 Stratholme troops. Turayan's 50,000 Dark Portal troops. Windsor's 40,000 Private Corps of the Marcus family. Magni's mechanized tank army with more than 3,000 dwarven steam tanks, as well as 5,000 cannons of various sizes, and a total force of 80,000 dwarves and gnomes. Kudran Wildhammer's 4,000 Griffin Knights. Cervanez's 20,000 Rangers and Mages mixed army. Duque personally led more than 10,000 mages and more than 30,000 Dalajan infantry mages. In addition to the militias organized by the people of Lord Emir, the total force was 800,000, and they pressed against the Scourge army. Throughout the month of October, the Dreadlords sent nearly 10 million undead creatures into the western plague lands, which was surrounded by mountains. From the newly invented abominations that were more than 3 meters tall, and were stitched together by many rotten corpses, to the zombie dogs that were resurrected from some unknown ravine from the sky to the ground, they fought with the Alliance in almost every inch of the western plague lands. But with Duque's endless targeted tactics and the Alliance's gradual advance, the western plague lands were finally recovered by the Alliance on the 30th of October. From the northernmost Hearth Valley to the southernmost Cold Wind Camp, from the westernmost, Undead Barrier, to the easternmost Soderal River, all the Scourge undead were swept away. If it wasn't for the Dreadlords forcing Anastrian, Calthuzad and Arthas to defend the newly built, Undead Barrier, the Alliance might have been able to enter the Tirisful Glades and take down Lord Emir. Chapter 867. However, this is the best we can do for now. Looking at the Undead Barrier in the distance, Duque could not help but sigh. Duque, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You've done well. I thank you on behalf of the people of Rotterdam, said Mograine, who was beside Duque. Duque waved his hand. Hurry up and act according to the arrangements made in the military conference. After the first snowfall, the road conditions will get worse. Understood. Mograine retreated. Between the Tirisful woodland where Rotterdam was located and the western plague lands, there was a huge mountain range that towered into the clouds. It was a natural barrier that even the Calamity army, whose core was the undead, could not easily cross. Ordinary ghouls and zombies could not cross it at all, unless they were high-level troops such as gargoyles and bone dragons. When winter came, whether they wanted it or not, they could only call a truce. How the 800,000 troops would survive the winter was a huge problem to begin with. From the beginning, Duque did not put so many troops into the western plague lands, especially the poorly trained militia. They were all sent to logistics by Duque. Since there were skeletons and zombies all over the place, they had enough to do. After defeating a counterattack organized by the Dreadlord Mal Gannis in mid-October, Duque let Turalian and Reginald Windsor lead a detachment from the western plague lands to the south to build Cold Wind Camp and open up the Icewind Mound and Sophia Highlands. That way, the Alliance would have a safe passage along the river that flowed out of Lake Deramere, connecting the north and south battlefronts. Even when they reached the Undead Barrier, Duque did not call back Turalian and Windsor's troops. The Undead Barrier was too narrow and there was no need for so many soldiers. Leaving too many people there would only increase the logistical pressure. Now, the Alliance's attack on the entire Rotterdam continent was basically supported by food reserves. Without Stratholme, which had millions of tons of food reserves, it would be impossible to support the attack of hundreds of thousands of people with just the South Sea city-state and shipping. Even though Duque had been missing for 10 years, he still took the initiative to protect Stratholme. This was also the reason why he had protected Stratholme. Duque wasn't a reckless person. Seeing that the Undead Barrier couldn't be breached, he also made plans for winter. The poorly trained Stratholme army and all the militia were pulled back to the vicinity of Stratholme. Most of the dwarves' Griffin Legion and mechanized troops had also withdrawn. Tanks were used for assault and it was too wasteful to leave them for defense. All kinds of artillery were enough. Other than building a semi-permanent fortress on the west side of the Fellstone Farm to the east of the Spectral Rampart, Duque had also sent 50,000 men from the Scarlet Cross to rebuild Hearth Valley and the North Mountain Sawmill. There was a reason why the Argent Northern Expedition was able to hold out for so long in Hearthglen. If they could not defend the western plague lands in the future, Hearth Valley could be used as a nail to disgust the Doomsday Army. Not far away, Duque looked at Queen Sylvanas, who was still training her rangers. Suddenly he made a malicious guess. Now that Queen Sylvanas had become a living and fragrant Sylvanas, would there be more forgotten ones in the future? Similarly, if the Blood Elves joined the Alliance, there would be nothing left for the Horde, right? In November, because Jaina had finally established a foothold in Theramore and built a huge magic communication circle, Duque finally received news from the other side of the Endless Sea. When the first news came, Duque felt that the wheel of history was still rolling forward. unhindered by anything. That was in September. Even if they found the right ocean current after a month of sea voyage, the strong tribal warriors were still tortured to the point that they were barely alive. When Thrall saw the older orcs looking at the red desolate land and calling it home, he was a little puzzled. Grom patted Thrall's shoulder and grinned. Before we passed through the dark portal to Azeroth, our world was like this. Desolate, harsh, but vast plains. There was never a lack of danger and huge prey that could feed over 100 people for a week. Only the most fearless warriors and the most powerful hunters could survive on the land. This is the orcs. Yes, this was the orcs. Yielding. The orcs that could always survive in the harshest of environments. The Horde's crude transport ship docked, and the orcs happily rushed to the shore. The wildest ones were already fighting with the giant wave crabs on the shore. Some of the unlucky ones had their fingers pinched off by the wave crab's huge pincers, but the orcs were laughing. That's right. Hunting. Hunting was the orcs' instinct. Hunting was the orcs' glory. Bleeding for instinct and glory was worth it. Grom Hellhound roared and shouted, "Yo! Our great chief! Give this land of the orcs' revival a name." Thrall couldn't suppress the excitement in his chest and shouted a name, Durotor. Grom understood immediately. Durotor was a homonym for Durotor in the orc language. Thrall was using this method to commemorate his father, who he had never met, who sacrificed himself to protect him and the Horde. For a moment the old orc's eyes were a little wet. 3 days later, the new Horde made the decision to build a new main orc city in a place with good feng shui on the west side of the river and the back of the mountains. In order to commemorate the brave and wise former great chief Orgrim, this new orc city will be named Orgrim. In the following period of time, Thrall, the blessed leader of the Horde, met the Tauren chief Cairn Bloodhoof on his way to find the prophet. The Horde began to receive help from the Tauren tribe. Then, at the beginning of October, a troll tribe also crossed the ocean and migrated to Durotor. It was Wujin's Darkspear tribe. Wujin succeeded his father, Sinjin, and became the new leader of the Darkspear trolls. Like the other trolls of the Darkspear tribe, he used to live in Stranglethorn Vale in the south of the Eastern Kingdom. Because of Durotor's strategy, Stormwind expanded southward. Coupled with the encirclement of the trolls in Zul Gurub, who believed in the blood god Hacker, the Darkspear trolls had no choice but to leave their hometown. Now there were only a few troll towns in a vast jungle. Not long after Wujin and his tribe arrived in Kalimdor, they were attacked by the Murlocs near Durotor. If it wasn't for Thrall's help, perhaps Wujin and his Darkspear tribe would have disappeared long ago. At this time Wujin's gratitude was beyond words. He and the forest trolls swore to serve the Horde and form an eternal alliance. Chapter 868. It was October and the weather was getting cold. Near Orgrimmar, Thrall looked at his tribesmen who had hunted down a large number of velociraptors and hung the dragon meat on wooden racks. Thrall, on the other hand, frowned. Durotor was not bad. Although it was a bit desolate, there was no lack of prey, which was enough for the beastmen to reproduce. The problem was that Durotor lacked wood because of its desolation. Thrall was fortunate enough to see the humans use a magical building material called cement. He had heard more than once from the beastmen seniors about how perfect and hard this so-called cement was. It was already fortunate that the humans spared the orcs because of those damned undead creatures. Thrall did not expect Duque to be kind enough to send cement to the beastmen and support the construction of Orgrimmar. Unfortunately, the beastmen craftsmen in this westward migration team only knew how to build houses made of wood and bricks. These craftsmen, who used to be beastmen laborers, told Thrall that with their current technology, they could not build houses that were more than 2 stories tall and thick enough. The same went for the city walls. After hearing about the terrifying firepower of the dwarves, Thrall decided that Orgrimmar also needed a city wall that could withstand the bombardment of those crude cannons. Once again the problem returned to the original point. To shape the city walls, the beastmen still needed a large amount of good wood. Thrall called Grom Hellroar. "Grom, the Horde needs your and your tribesmen's services." "Speak. I'll do it." Grom, who had recently eaten a lot and was carrying Hellroar, looked very energetic. "The Horde needs a large amount of good wood to build a city and a city wall. Unfortunately, the west of Durotor is a terrible place. The Barren Lands, right? That's a terrible and fitting name." Grom curled his lips. "The Horde scouts are already more than a week's walk away from Durotor. The south of the Barren Lands is also a terrible place with few trees. The Stonetalan Mountains to the west aren't much better. The only place with enough wood is the Grey Valley to the north of the Barren Lands. What's wrong there? I don't know. Maybe it's some intelligent race or some large groups of beasts. Anyway, none of the scouts who went into the forest in the Grey Valley returned. This gives me a bad feeling. Sal frowned. He actually had an ominous premonition. Unfortunately, the new tribe urgently needed a large amount of good wood. What do you want the Warsong clan to do? Take your men and 5,000 orc carpenters with you. Try your best not to offend the natives of Grey Valley and bring back enough wood. That's about the amount that 5,000 people can carry back. That's about it. No problem. Grom whistled and walked out of the tent. Wait, Grom. Thrall called out to the tribal hero. What? Grom stopped. The tribe is too weak now. If possible, try not to clash with the large intelligent races on this continent. Grom smiled, his fangs glinting coldly. It's fine. No one is my blood-roar opponent. The bad premonition in Sal's heart grew stronger, but he didn't have another organized army with enough people to use. He was quite at ease with Lexer, but unfortunately Lexer was a lone ranger. Woking was also not bad, but the problem was that the Darkspear clan had too few people. Thrall had no choice. What the Horde didn't know was that less than 500 kilometers south of Duroder's southernmost cliffs, on a place called Thuramore Island, Jaina's Alliance Expeditionary Force had also gained a foothold. Moreover, the construction on Thuramore Island was much faster than that of the Horde's Orgrimmar. In the center of the island, a huge 5-story mage tower had already risen from the ground. It's hard to imagine that such a large building only took us a week. The rest of the week was spent waiting for the cement to completely dry. Jaina sighed as she looked at the mage tower. That's right. Advisor Aegwin agreed. This wasn't the first time Jaina had seen a country bumpkin with cement. But no matter how many times she saw this magical building material, it was still amazing. As long as the craftsman marked the location of the piles on the ground, Jaina would even personally use magic to blast holes in the ground in order to save time. When the craftsman inserted steel bars into the long and straight deep holes blasted with arcane magic and poured in the mix of cement, the foundation was ready in just 3 days. Then it was time to erect the piles and pour the cement into the molds. As for the cooling of the cement, this was never a problem. For her new residents, Jaina did not hesitate to personally use frost magic to cool the cement quickly and evenly. So in just a week, a miraculous mage tower stood in the center of the island. If Duque was here, he would definitely praise Jaina for being self-taught. In the history before Duke's transmigration, when the Americans were building the famous Hoover Dam back then, in order to speed up the work and to cool all parts of the reinforced concrete structure that weighed more than 100 tons at the same time, after the modeling was completed and the cement was poured, liquid nitrogen was poured to cool it directly. Now Jaina used magic to complete all of this. Looking at the little kingdom of her dreams changing day by day, listening to the cheers of the people who came across the ocean to seek refuge, Jaina's heart was filled with satisfaction. The only thing that made Jaina extremely conflicted was that she seemed to be a bit unworthy of the title of Queen of Theramore. There were too many places where Duque's shadow could be seen. Without the cement and the Marcus family's construction team, she might have had to live in a terrible tent for a month after arriving. This was very difficult for Jaina, who was born as a princess. After all, Theramore Island was half surrounded by the dust swamp. Since it was a swamp in the middle of summer in August and September, what was the most abundant? Mosquitoes. Not everyone could run around with an ice shield like Jaina. The mosquitoes that filled the sky and the ground were annoying to see from afar. However, the powerful mosquito repellent provided by the Marcus Chamber of Commerce for free, the Pa X-rays to kill mosquitoes, and the screen windows very considerately solved most of Jaina's problems. Moreover, the extremely insane new method of reclamation made the entire Thuramore Island have no so-called blind spots from the beginning of the construction of the city. Not to mention, Duque shipped a large batch of magic materials from the Dalajan and Kuel Salis to the ship. What was it for? To directly make magic defense inscriptions for the walls of Theramore Island that were about to be built. Jaina held her forehead. I always feel like I'm like a kite. When that bastard Duque wants me to go back, he can just retract the line. Chapter 869. This was not an illusion. If the fleet at her disposal could send 10,000 people across the ocean to Theramore, it would be amazing. If Lordaeron was ravaged by natural disasters, she would have to learn from Duque during the first battle at the Dark Portal. She would first send people to a small island not far from the mainland, and then send them across the sea in batches. Now she was supported by the entire Stormwind Navy, Kurtira's Fourth Fleet and Marcus Merchant Fleet. In total there were more than 1,500 ships of various sizes. 100,000 refugees, more than 15,000 Theramore soldiers, and more than 20,000 tons of all kinds of supplies, were all transported here in a magnificent manner. 10 years ago the galleons with 4 or even 5 masts had become the mainstream of the Eastern Kingdom. Whether in terms of speed or maneuverability, these new ships were far superior to the Horde's old ships. Jaina's fleet, which set off 2 weeks later than the Horde, arrived at Kalimdor almost at the same time as the Horde. Coupled with the magic of cement, the Theramore Expeditionary Force established itself faster than the Horde. If one did not know better, they would think that Duque had deliberately dug a pit for the Horde to jump into. When the fleet had finished unloading, Vice Admiral Jessie Fairvell came to ask Jaina if they could return. If this sturdy female general could be bribed, Jaina might not mind doing so. Unfortunately, Jessie was Duque's subordinate, and after nearly 15 years of assimilation, the famous Bloodsail pirate squadron commander had long since become Duque's loyal follower. Ruthless and abiding by orders, Jessie was definitely a general that all high-ranking people liked. It's fine here. I will set up a magic teleportation circle as soon as possible to maintain contact with the Alliance. Go back and send my regards to Lord Marcus. After sending Jessie away, Jaina sat on the top floor of the newly built Mage Tower, looking down at Theramore, which looked like a super large construction site, and the coastline covered with tents. She then looked at the large pile of Swamp Survival Handbook, personally written by Duque in the room, and suddenly sighed. Damn it, is that guy Duque really a prophet? He thinks of everything. I don't feel any sense of challenge. Egwene teased her from the side. Have you finally realized what kind of opponent you'd be facing if you were to fight? Jaina shrugged. 2 months ago I wanted to be a good Mrs. Marcus. Egwene was non-committal. Alright. Now it's time to greet the tribe. A cold glint flashed in Jaina's eyes. The next second, when Egwene wanted to remind her, she controlled her emotions very well. I know what to do. I came for peace and cooperation. Before the Alliance and the Horde have irreconcilable conflicts, I will be a good pioneer and Alliance ambassador. Egwene nodded. It's good that you know. After all, the difference between the Alliance and the Horde was too big. Since humans and orcs were once mortal enemies, now the elves and the trolls had thousands of years of grudges between them. If the Scourge army was still around, perhaps the Alliance and the Horde would temporarily work together under the pressure. Once there's no external help, I'm afraid. Jaina walked to the window and stared at the north. I know what to do. If necessary, I'll use some magic tricks that the orcs can't understand. Time passed. Less than a week after Sal sent Grom's Warsong clan north to Grey Valley, he was surprised to receive a message. The Alliance's messenger had come to visit. Sal's heart stopped beating for a moment. The first thing that came to his mind was Duque's prophetic eyes that seemed to be able to see through the future. He tilted his head and asked Woken, "What do you think?" Although it was still a short time, Sal was already very fond of listening to Woken's opinion. The orcs were a brave race, and there was never a lack of brave warriors among the orcs. Unfortunately, the more brave a warrior was, the less good a manager or a good leader. When he was really with his own people, Sal really understood why Orgrim valued him so much. There were too few people with great wisdom among the orcs and too many people with a one-track mind. The appearance of Woken, who was wise and knew how to judge the situation, made up for the lack of wisdom in the tribe to a large extent. Now in the tribe, Woken's position had unknowingly ranked below Grom and Varrock Salyafar. He was ranked 4th, even above the Tauren chief Cairn Bloodhoof. In response to Sal's question, Woken sorted out his thoughts and replied, "According to what you said, the Alliance is also troubled by the terrifying army of the dead, the Scourge army, and is even on the verge of collapse. If this is the case, the Alliance's messenger should not be here to declare war. We will only know the specifics when we meet them. Right now we also lack information about the Lordaeron continent." Woken paused for a moment. "However, let Sir Salyafar go to prepare for war just in case. Sal nodded, and Varrock immediately understood and went to prepare the army. Varrock and Brock were brothers. These two powerful orc warriors from the Blackrock clan had never been defeated on the battlefield. Of course, this might have something to do with the fact that they had not yet faced the strongest paladins of the alliance. Unlike Brock, who was only strong as a single soldier, Varrock was more talented in leadership. Varrock, who was also known as King Salyafar, had been serving the Horde ever since he drank the blood of Manaroth with Grom Hellscream. He led the Horde to surround Shotrath and Stormwind City, and until the end of the Second War he had never been defeated. In the First War, when Orgrim Doomhammer led the Horde, he saw Salyafar's efficiency and cruelty on the battlefield, and appointed Salyafar as his general. Rumor had it that Salyafar had once waved his hand and cut 3 human knights in half horizontally. After Orgrim died at Arthes's hands, Thrall promoted Varrock. Now Varrock could be said to be the chieftain of the small Blackrock clan. The meeting with the Alliance's messenger was at a large construction site in Orgrimmar. Although Woken advised Sal that it was not good to let the Alliance see through the Horde, Sal shook his head and refused. Orgrim is such a huge city, it is impossible to hide. In that case, why not show the Alliance how magnificent the new city that is about to become the center of the Horde is? Just like that, surrounded by 5,000 orc warriors, Sal welcomed a woman who should have been entangled with his fate, the Alliance's ambassador, Jaina Proudmoore. Chapter 870. In the eyes of most orcs, they looked down on human women. With such a slender waist, wouldn't it be broken in 2 hits? With such a small butt, it would pierce his flesh in a few hits. Her breasts were not much bigger than a pear. She must have no milk when giving birth. This Alliance messenger Jaina was really ugly. Feeling the disdain from his own orc guards, and even an orc who called Jaina an ugly woman at a volume of 100 decibels, Sal's eyebrows kept twitching. The difference in aesthetics brought about by different races and styles was unbearable. As someone who had grown up among humans, Sal had completely accepted the aesthetics of humans. Like any adult male, he was shocked by Jaina's soul-stirring beauty. Back then, when Orgrim had stolen him from Gohalton Castle and sent him to Brill, Sal was still a slave gladiator. When he was growing up, it was as if fate had coincided. He met a servant who had immigrated from Hillsbrad. The servant had a daughter named Taretha Foxton. She was a little girl who had never seen war with her own eyes. Because of the death of her own brother, she projected Sal, who had been taken care of by her parents, as a substitute for her brother. She was not afraid of this green-skinned orc at all. She often taught Sal, who knew nothing about human society, many things in private. She secretly gave all kinds of books to Sal to read without his master's knowledge, and secretly exchanged letters with Sal for many years. Taretha's behavior was not only like a kind mother, but also like a good sister who took care of her brother. She cultivated Sal to be a good leader who was both tolerant and dignified. Even though Sal had been separated from Teresha when he broke free from Briar's cage, at this moment for some reason he felt that Teresha's voice and appearance overlapped with this female emissary of the Alliance in front of him. Sal sat on the rough chief's throne, opened his arms and spoke in the common human language with a Lordaeron accent. "Hello. Messenger of the Alliance, I am the current chief of the tribe, Sal. May I have the honor of knowing your name?" "Beautiful lady." To everyone's surprise, Jaina bowed slightly and replied in the Blackrock tribe's orc language, "Good day to you, strong great chief Sar. I am Princess Kertiras of the Human Kingdom, leader of the Kalimdor Pioneers and Alliance Ambassador Jaina Proudmoore." Almost all the orc guards became excited when they heard this. Proudmoore. A ferocious family named second only to Marcus among the older generation of beastmen. The old warriors who had experienced the second battle of the Dark Portal might not understand why Duque was the mastermind, but they definitely knew that the fleet that buried hundreds of thousands of elite orcs was the fleet of a man named Proudmoore. Not only that, but this woman also claimed to be the pioneer of Kalimdor. Did this mean that the despicable humans had tricked them out of the human territory, and now they wanted to take over this barren land that the orcs regarded as their own backyard? The orcs were clamoring. However, as Sal suddenly raised his hand, all 5,000 beastmen instantly fell silent. Even though many of the green-skinned beastmen were red in the face, no one dared to make a fuss or attack Jaina. Even Jaina, who was used to seeing the elites of the Alliance, was secretly shocked that Ling Xing's actions had reached such a level. Sal's voice sounded again. This time he spoke in the orc language. Although I would like to say welcome, the word welcome has always been reserved for our own people and friends. I just don't know if the emissary's intention is war or peace. Jaina shook her head slowly. Chief Salbrill, where you grew up, is still a paradise for the undead until I speak to you. The war has not ended, but it is not a war between the Alliance and the Horde, but a war between the living and the dead. If the silence just now was the silence of people panting and suppressing their anger, then the current silence had evolved into absolute silence. Almost every orc sucked in a breath of cold air. From the slightly stifling battle in Dalaran's territory to the continuous stream of injured orcs turning into ashen undying beasts, the undying realm. Every orc present had experienced the horror of the undead army. Even on the ships that came here, there were still some orcs who concealed their injuries and turned into undead along the way, harming their own compatriots. There were a total of 13 ships that, because the captains were soft-hearted or careless, didn't control the undead well or disinfect them, and as a result, these ships all turned into ghost ships floating on the endless sea. Sal and Wajin looked at each other and then nodded to Varrock, who was leading the army. He stood up and raised the hammer of destruction to announce to the orcs. For the time being, the grievances between the Alliance and the Horde will be put aside. In order to let the dead rest in peace and let the living continue to have the right to live, I declare that the Alliance emissary is a friend of the Horde. Everyone dismiss. The Horde's 5,000 orc army dispersed in an uproar. This allowed Jaina's heart to relax a little. Woken made an inviting gesture and led Jaina to follow behind Sal into the great chieftain's tent, which was as tall as 3 people. Sal sat down on the most gorgeous velociraptor skin in the tent. When he invited Jaina to sit down, Jaina didn't hide her disgust. With a flick of her finger, a chair made of pure ice suddenly appeared under Jaina's buttocks. Stopping the guard, Sal frowned slightly. Lord Proudmoore is a mage? Yes. Radiant Moon. Although he didn't understand why Duque sent such a mage and princess as an emissary, this couldn't stop Sal's curiosity about Jaina and the current situation of the Alliance. Sal, who couldn't know the situation on the other side of the sea, was now at a loss. He hoped to meet a more immature diplomatic emissary than him, which would give him more initiative in the following negotiations. Sal was indeed very smart, and he had also seen the human world. Unfortunately, many things in the world were not equal. He had been in Lordaeron for a long time, so he couldn't understand how advanced the technology in the southern part of the continent was. Also, because of the unequal intelligence, he couldn't judge the intention of Jaina's next words. After all, Sal was only a 15-year-old boy. No matter how talented he was, there was still a huge gap in experience between him and Jaina. If Orgrim was still there, it would be better. Unfortunately, the only advisor around him was Wajin, who also knew little about human society. At this point in time, although Wajin was wise, he was just a country bumpkin who had just escaped from the jungle of Stranglethorn Vale. When Jaina spoke, Sal and the others were perfectly led. Chapter 871. A truly outstanding lie that could deceive people would be 90% true and 10% false. As long as the most critical point could be deceived, it would be considered a real success. Jaina portrayed herself as a half-baked pioneer who relied on her powerful magic to climb to a high position, befitting her noble identity. In the following conversation, she revealed the predicament of the Alliance, intentionally or unintentionally. Although I don't want to admit it, I have to be honest. The Alliance is in the biggest crisis since its establishment. The capital of Lordaeron, the leader of the Alliance, has fallen because of the rebellion of the fallen prince. The current situation is that the king of Lordaeron has been killed, and 2/3 of the territory has fallen into the plague. The Dalajan has been destroyed, and Antonidas has been captured and turned into a great lich. The Stormguard king Galan Trollbane has been turned into an immortal, and Gilnis has been defeated, and was forced to release endless werewolves from the Emerald Dream. If Jaina deliberately leaked the information, it would undoubtedly be extremely stupid to expose one's own weakness on a diplomatic level. A weak alliance would undoubtedly weaken one's bargaining chips in negotiations. On the other hand, it could also be used as a warning to the enemy. Lordaeron, Dalajan, Stormguard, and Gilnis were all countries that had dealt a heavy blow to the Horde during the previous battle at the Dark Portal. The bravery of the soldiers of these countries was still deeply imprinted in the hearts of many of the older orcs. However, such powerful countries had all been destroyed. One could imagine how ferocious the Calamity army was. In the imagination of the orcs, the fall of the capital, the death of the king or the death of the king, was definitely a state of annihilation. The intuition of the orcs was amazing. Coupled with the mysterious shaman witchcraft, if Jaina were to lie, Thrall would see through her at any moment. When that happened, it would not be fun. However, every word and situation that Jaina said was the truth, which made it seem like the other things that Jaina said were more like arguments to boost her morale. For example, "But we are not afraid. We still have the strongest commander of the Alliance, Duke Marcus. He and the Stormwind army led by Sir Lothar, together with the tanks of the Iron Furnace Fort. A total of 200,000 troops are landing in South Shore. We will definitely recover the entire Lordaeron continent." Was Thrall worried about Duque? Of course. However, at this moment Azeroth, the best actress of the year Jaina, had already led Sal and the rest into a trap. How could Sal possibly know that the situation in Rotterdam was actually far from what they had imagined? The next scene was even more exciting. Just as Jaina was complaining, Varrock came in and said, "Great Chief, a human guard insists on interrupting your meeting with the Alliance emissary. He wants to inform the Alliance emissary directly." Sal said, "Let him in." An Alliance guard was led into the tent by Varrock. He hurriedly whispered something to Jaina. Jaina shuddered and gritted her teeth as if she had decided to confess. The latest news is that the Scourge used the traitors of the Silver Moon Council to attack Kuel Salis with the teleportation circle. Now that Silvery Moon City has been destroyed, Breaking Dawn Archmage Anastrian Sunstrider, the king of Kuel Salis, has joined the Scourge army and become a great lich. In the end, Jaina added, "I already knew that the Doomsday army had their eyes on the High Elves. I just didn't expect it to be like this." Jaina's bitter and embarrassed look made the young Sal's heart soften. At this time Jaina said, "It is precisely because we are worried that the situation in Lordaeron will collapse. If we do not handle it well, even Stormwind City and Iron Furnace Castle in the south will not be able to defend. So Commander Marcus sent me to lead a group of refugees to the west to cross the Endless Sea and build a refuge in Kalimdor. This time I came to ask the tribe to temporarily not attack the refuge built by the Alliance on Thermore Island for the sake of us all living beings." As soon as this sentence came out, Sal, Wajin and other tribal leaders suddenly had a sense of resonance with the people who had fallen into the same predicament. It turned out that the once incomparably powerful Alliance had fallen to this point. For a moment, even Sal and the others felt their hearts sink. After Jaina put out a lot of useless non-aggression treaties between the Alliance and the tribe, Sal politely asked Jaina to go and rest first. Then of course it was a closed-door meeting of the tribe leaders. Sal spoke first. "What do you think of the proposal of the Alliance this time?" Varrock Seraphar gestured at the rough map in the big tent. The current map in the tribe's hands was so rough that there was no shadow, only a scribbled coastline and a few general areas. Except for Duroder, which was a little clear, the barren land in the west, the Stonetalan Mountains in the west, and the Dustwallow Swamp in the south were all blurred. Varrock gestured for a long time but still frowned and said, "Too close." Yes, Thuramore was too close to the tribe's new capital. It was like a sharp dagger hanging around the tribe's neck. In case the Alliance went to war with the Horde, the Alliance's fleet could sweep the entire east coast of Duroder and the Echo Islands where the trolls lived within 3 days. Sal did not speak. He looked at Wajin. The troll leader said, "As an emissary she must have a lot to hide. But everyone will have their own secrets in their heart. My intuition tells me that every word she said is true." Varrock nodded. "I also think it is true. We have all seen how terrifying that damn undead legion is. It is not unusual to have such a result." Sal sighed. "Then we have a conclusion. Let's accept this alliance for the time being. In case something goes wrong in the future. Let's destroy Theramore's alliance first. Don't give the alliance a bridgehead to step into Kalimdor." Half a day later, Jaina returned to Theramore with a 5-year non-aggression treaty between the alliance and the Horde. When she returned, she found that the magic communication array with the Eastern Kingdom had been set up, so she sent the message back, along with what she had seen and heard. In her bedroom, Jaina used a basin placed in the middle of the room to wash her feet while humming happily, "Humph. Let me develop with peace of mind and nail Theramore to the Kalimdor continent. Stupid orcs. You dirty green-skinned creatures are only worthy of drinking the princess's foot-washing water." At this time a sudden voice came, Well, you did a good job this time. Sal really should drink your foot-washing water. The voice almost scared Jaina to the ground. Chapter 872. No one could easily pass through a radiant moon mage's perception and sneak into her mage tower, even if it was an incomplete mage tower, unless they were much, much stronger than the radiant moon mage. When Jaina looked over, she was furious. Duke, you bastard. Why are you here? At least knock on the door. Why did you barge in? At this moment, Jaina's clothes were still very tidy. Her upper body was still that silver breastplate, but her robe was lifted, revealing 2 plump white thighs. She was just washing her feet. Was this exposure? Duque didn't think so. Although it was pleasing to the eye, Jaina felt that Duque was invading her privacy. A few arcane missiles hit Duque's face, the magic shield in front of him. Jaina obviously knew that it was useless, but she had to vent her anger. Sometimes, Duque really didn't understand women. Why did Azeroth women like to wear 3-point armor? It didn't matter if a large part of their skin was exposed to the air, but she got so excited just seeing her thighs under her robe? Why did Wuxia get so passionate when she was playing human alchemy with him, and then chase him out after changing clothes? Well, men probably wouldn't understand this kind of thing about modesty for the rest of their lives. Duque, this idiot, actually added fuel to the fire at this time. Didn't you say last time that you could let me take a treasure that you've preserved for 27 years at any time? Why is it like this just looking at your feet? You bastard. I've changed my mind. If you have the ability to bring me the title of Lady Marcus, I'll give you my treasure immediately. Jaina showed her power, and this time she started throwing big fireballs. Duque had no choice but to bitterly be a target, using his magic shield until Jaina calmed down. After a while. Have you calmed down? No. Jaina gritted her teeth. Then continue. Damn it. Duke, come here and let me bite your arm. Swear that you won't enter my Magus Tower without my permission again, and we'll call it even. Are you a dog? Duque replied timidly. Are you coming over? If you dare to run away this time, I'll abandon Theramore and go back to the Eastern Kingdom to tell everyone that you've abandoned me. Jaina gave an ultimatum. Duque gritted his teeth, resigned himself to his fate, swore an oath, and extended his hand. It was a heart-wrenching howl. Who was it that was screaming in the Silent Wizard Tower? In the end, was it a tragedy of human relations? Or was it a terrifying supernatural phenomenon? Please listen. Poo. When Duque came back to his senses, he felt that it was really painful. What happened next left Duque scratching his head in confusion. Jaina did bite, and when she let go, a deep but small bite mark was left. One moment, Duque was on the verge of tears, and the next moment, Jaina quickly applied the red healing holy water produced by Stratholme on Duque. Seeing Jaina treat his wound with great care, and even licked away the few drops of red medicine that flowed out with her small tongue, the shameless Duque suddenly felt that Jaina was actually quite sexy. Sensing that the atmosphere had become ambiguous, Jaina acted like a dead pig unafraid of boiling water. What, you're finally moved by me? I really don't understand why you've been avoiding me for the past 10 years. Alright, it's too late now. You're already the queen's husband, and no matter who you marry, Curtilas won't be able to handle it. We won't have a future together. Duque was embarrassed. This was the downside of magical communication. He was too well informed. Sensing that the atmosphere had cooled, Duque did not continue playing with fire. He began to ask Jaina about the details of the mission. After that, Jaina asked, "You wanted me to build a bridgehead and balance the relationship with the Horde, and I did it. What's next?" I don't know why Archimonde hasn't come to Kalimdor for so long. But once he comes, the war over the Well of Eternity will be unavoidable. When that time comes, the opportunity for the Night Elves, the Alliance, and the Horde to unite will appear. Jaina suddenly asked, "Are you confident that you can deal with Archimonde? If it's just the Alliance, about 30%, and the price will be the destruction of all the Alliance's elite troops." Jaina was very smart, and she immediately sensed what Duque was thinking. It wasn't that the Alliance couldn't fight the Burning Legion alone, but the price would be too high. If the Alliance really sacrificed everything for the world of Azeroth, it would be the rise of the Horde and the destruction of the humans, elves, and dwarves. Dooku was doing this because he wanted to shoulder the burden and dig a pit together. Her mission this time was actually a covert move against the Horde. At the very least, it would force the Horde to go all out. When the time came to face the Burning Legion, who would survive would depend on their own abilities. Jaina was silent for a while, then changed the topic. Senior brother Ronan, I've already sent a ship to Azhara. As long as he's not too unlucky with the strength of him, Lilith, and that Miss Abendis, it shouldn't be too big of a problem for them to contact the legendary night elves. Duque said in a low voice. All right, now we just have to wait for the opportunity to join forces. Do we wait for Archimonde to come? No. If we wait for Archimonde to come, it'll be too late. Duque tried hard to recall this part of history that wasn't completely unrecognizable. It wasn't easy to stop Archimonde's attack. After Archimonde came ashore, the commander of the Burning Legion would fly into a rage and summon a large number of Apocalypse guards, as well as the elites of the Scourge army. If they wanted to face Archimonde directly, they had to at least get rid of his lackeys to force him out. Thus, the most ideal situation was to set up defenses at Mount Hyjal, the home of the Night Elves, before Archimonde set foot on the Kalimdor continent. Suddenly, a silver magic lamp lit up on the highest floor of the Mage Tower, blinking. Jaina snapped her fingers and Egwene's voice sounded. Apologies for interrupting your reunion. A messenger from the Horde riding a wyvern just came to our northern sentry tower. He said that the Chief Sar wants to see you urgently, and hopes that you can go as soon as possible. Jaina and Duque looked at each other. I'll be back soon. 10 minutes later, on the other side of Orgrimmar, a magic circle surrounded by orc guards began to glow. That was the magic formation that Sar had allowed Jaina to use when she needed an urgent visit. Brock, who had been waiting for a long time, was stunned when he saw Jaina appear on the magic formation with 2 female magician guards. He then said in broken common language, Lady, follow me. Chapter 873. Zhou was very worried. He did not know if he had made the right decision by asking Jaina to come. It was not a good thing for a young leader to show his weakness to an alliance that was once an enemy. Wajin gave Zhou determination. We have no choice. If the other party can easily destroy such a powerful clan in the Horde, they have the ability to destroy all of us, even Theramor's alliance advance force. The weak had to stick together. This was an unchanging law. After seeing Jaina, Zhou's first words were, the Warsong clan of the Horde is in a place called Grey Valley in the north. The entire clan, along with 5,000 workers, nearly 30,000 people, are missing. Jaina's face was full of shock. Although she did not personally experience the second battle of the Dark Portal, Jaina had been trained by someone who had thrown her into the Tearsful Woodlands in a world of ice and snow. Jaina was very clear about how powerful the 20,000 Warsong tribe beastmen were. But the change in her eyes in the next moment betrayed her inner thoughts. Zhou suddenly lost his voice. You know what's in Grey Valley? Damn it. This orc is too smart and his intuition is too amazing. Jaina spat disdainfully in her heart, but she could not show it. If she guessed correctly, this might be the opportunity that Duque had been waiting for. Maybe I know. If you can, for the sake of the new common threat, please tell us. Jaina took a deep breath. Do you know the High Elves? Zhou nodded. I've heard of them from the former Chief Orgrim, and I've occasionally seen a few of them in Lordaeron. Then do you know that the High Elves were actually exiled by their compatriots thousands of years ago, then crossed the Endless Sea to reach the Eastern Kingdom, and finally established their own kingdom in the northernmost part of the continent? You mean, the Night Elves? This is a tribe that only exists in the ancient legends of the High Elves. Even the High Elves themselves have not seen them for at least 7,000 years. In the entire alliance, we are not even sure if they still exist in the world. But if there is a force in the north of Kalimdor that can annihilate more than 30,000 orc elites in one go, I can only think of the Night Elves. Zhou anxiously asked, what are the characteristics of the Night Elves that you know? Jaina glanced at Wajin, who was not far from Thrall. Legend has it that the ancestors of the Night Elves were also trolls, so their characteristics should be more similar to forest trolls. However, when the Night Elves exiled the High Elves, the Night Elves were ruled by druids who advocated nature. Oh no. Thrall's face turned pale. I sent the Warsong clan to Grey Valley to cut down trees. If you don't court death, you'll die. There really was no limit to courting death. Duque only revealed the knowledge that Jaina needed, so Jaina couldn't know more. It was enough to tell the tribe that they had provoked an ancient and powerful race. Jaina still remembered what Duque said to her before he left. The Night Elves should exist. However, they were a race even more stubborn than the High Elves. They needed an opportunity to break through their self-imposed blockade. Don't worry, we don't need to do anything. According to the characteristics of the tribe, they will definitely clash. Which of the High Elves are the Night Elves more inclined toward? The Rangers. However, their love for the forest is more extreme. Back to the present. After hearing Thrall say that he had sent the Warsong clan to Grey Valley to cut down trees, Jaina really laughed out loud. The Night Elves loved nature and regarded the forest as their life. If they met a tribe that insisted on cutting down trees to build houses, it would really be laughable. As Jaina expected, the Warsong clan was in huge trouble. Everything was fine at first. After entering Grey Valley, Warsong first carefully cut down trees on the periphery. However, Grom soon found that the trees on the periphery of the forest did not meet the requirements. They were too young. In a great city, the taller the better, the thicker the better, the stronger the giant wood. Without finding any danger, Grom waved his hand and divided the clan into 4 groups of 5,000 people. They surrounded the woodcutters and set off into the depths of the forest. After 2 days in the forest, they found the giant trees they wanted. However, in less than an hour, a nightmare came. It was a silent, swift arrow from the darkness of the forest. It was as dense as heavy rain, but as accurate as a poisonous snake. They aimed at the vulnerable eyeballs and unprotected throats of the orcs. The warriors of the tribe were never afraid of arrows from the front. Even when facing a dense array of arrows from the humans, they were confident that after a certain amount of sacrifice, they would be able to pull the battle into close combat. Not this time. The mysterious enemy used the essence of guerrilla warfare to the extreme. They attacked and ran, and all of them were killed in one shot. Before the orcs could rush over, the enemy would disappear into the forest like a ghost. Most of the time, entire squads would perish in battle without a sound or a trace. In just half a day, the Warsong clan was forced into a desperate situation. More than 10,000 Warsong warriors had fallen in the forest, and the 5,000 woodcutters were almost completely wiped out. Grom tried to lead his people out of this desperate situation, but the enemy was still relentless in their pursuit. Any shouts would be met with silence from the other side, replying with even sharper arrows. Grom despaired until he smelled a familiar scent, the scent of demon blood. Why would there be demon blood in the forest that he had not seen for 20 years? Grom's first thought was that this was a demon's plot. But did he have a choice? Perhaps he and his people still had a way out. Not drinking. It was total annihilation. Grom hell roared, his eyes bloodshot. Since you want me to die, then I'll kill you first. Grom led his clansmen and drank the devil's blood without hesitation. The earth-shattering roar echoed in the forest that had been silent for nearly 10,000 years in Grey Valley. The night elves besieging the orcs would never have imagined that the green-skinned creatures would suddenly become many times stronger in just an hour. What used to be a vital point was no longer a vital point. The throat that could be pierced with one arrow seemed to be covered by a thick layer of rhinoceros skin. The arrows that were shot at the eyeballs were all deflected away by the orcs' movements and reactions, which were much faster than the orcs. The fallen orcs' speed, strength, and agility far surpassed the night elves. They caught up to the night elves and killed them one by one. They cruelly dismembered their corpses and even chewed on their flesh. Finally, Grom saw the enemy's main character appear. It was a mysterious male with an elf's upper body and a stag's lower body. Chapter 874. On the other side, while Sal and Jaina were discussing the disappearance of the Warsong clan, new news came. Sal cried out, "What? Has the Warsong clan gone mad? Even attacking their own people without distinguishing between friend and foe? Like the old batch of orcs who drank the devil's blood?" In the face of a poison like demon blood that could make orcs crazy, Sal would rather hear about the Warsong clan's rebellion. It had been 20 years since Grom drank demon blood for the first time. Sal would always remember how violent and painful the old orc was when he saw the demon blood act up when he was young. When he received the news from the Warsong clan, Sal was very annoyed. The Horde didn't have magic communication. With Orgrimmar as the center, the Horde's forces were expanding to the barren lands. Now the Horde had a vast but barren territory. The only thing that maintained such a large territory was the wyverns raised by the Frostwolf clan. There weren't many wyverns in the Horde which were large enough to carry orcs in flight. The only 30 or so were all used for communication. Even with the wyverns, there was still a delay in the transmission of information. Sal had no idea what was going on. Sorry, Princess Proudmoore. It seems that I have to leave today. After all, the Warsong clan is out of control. This is too serious for the Horde, Sal said. Just as Jaina was about to say something, she received a shocking magical message. Duque's voice in the message was extremely urgent. Finna. Come back to Theramore immediately. Something big has happened to Kurtiras. Jaina's face turned pale. She threw a magic messaging crystal to Thrall and said, "This is a magic locator. When you're in an emergency, crush the shell of this thing. Hold the white bead inside and imagine the terrain around you. I should be rushing over to help you." With that, she didn't hesitate to activate the teleportation spell in front of Sal, turning herself into a stream of light and flying to the set coordinates in Theramore's space. When Jaina returned to Theramore and her vision was restored, she felt that something was wrong. Standing at the door of the teleportation hall, Duque's face was sullen. In her impression, Duque was always full of wisdom and foresight. It was as if the development of everything in the world could not escape his expectations. But now Duque's face, which was a mixture of shock and bitterness, was clearly telling her that something unexpected had happened, and it was related to her. A sense of foreboding filled Gianna's chest. Duque. What happened? Duque didn't know what kind of expression he should use to face the anxious Jaina, nor did he know what kind of tone he should use to answer her questions. After taking a deep breath and remaining silent for 3 seconds, Duque said, "The first fleet of Kultiras and Kultiras were attacked one after another. His Majesty Daelin and His Highness Tandrid's family. Something happened." As if struck by lightning, Jaina's mind went blank. "No. This is impossible. This can't be true." Gianna felt dizzy and almost fainted on the spot. Duque hurriedly held the limp Jaina in his arms. He could clearly feel that the body of this superheroine in history was no different from that of a weak woman who had gone through a drastic change. Gianna could only feel the heat in her body flowing wildly into some unknown hole. So cold. She almost subconsciously hugged Duque tightly. She needed the little warmth from that masculine body. Duque just sat on the ground and hugged Jaina quietly. How much time had passed? 1 minute? 5 minutes? Or a century? He didn't know. After a long time, Jaina finally regained her senses. "Has the news been confirmed?" Jaina raised her head in grief. Her once bright red lips had lost their color and were turning white. "The remnants of the First Fleet have reached the shore. His Majesty Daelin is in Theramore." The world seemed to be collapsing. Jaina staggered and almost fell out of Duque's arms. Duque quickly put his arms around Jaina, who was as soft as mud, and hugged her again. After an unknown amount of time, Jaina regained her strength. "Help me." Duque silently did as he was told. Sure enough, Jaina in this life had not experienced the battle to eliminate the plague with Arthas. She went straight to Theramore. Her experience was lacking and her mentality was not as calm. Just like that, Duque helped Jaina out of the lowest floor of the Mage Tower. Surrounded by a group of guards, they arrived at the newly built medium-sized church in Theramore. Through the open door, what did Jaina see? Her father, who she had cursed countless times but was like an unkillable cockroach, who had miraculously survived time and time again at sea, was lying coldly on the altar in the middle of the church. His lower body was covered with the flag of Kultiras. He was so quiet, a far cry from the father who always spoke in a loud and gruff voice in her memory. He had deliberately alienated her because of the royal power, treated her indifferently and exiled her in disguise. All the accumulated resentment disappeared at this moment. Jaina struggled to leave Duque's support and threw herself on the altar. She touched her father's body with trembling hands. Sparkling tears fell, dripping onto the flag of Kultiras and blossomed into blossoms. For a long time, Jaina's shoulders stopped trembling. "Father, how did he die?" "It's Archimonde." A female voice interrupted. It was only at this moment that Jaina noticed that the woman she had once found an eyesore and hated, her father's lover Gina Goldsword, was sitting not far away. Jaina bit her lip hard and red blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth. "Continue." "A week ago, Daelin and I, along with Kultira's First Fleet, were on the opposite side of the North Stream coast. It was about 500 nautical miles away, and we were cleaning up the ghost ships floating on the sea full of undead. Then Archimonde suddenly appeared from the bottom of the sea. There were no signs at all. He was like a mountain rising from the bottom of the sea, and he directly cut the entire bee squadron in half. Gina Goldsword's face was also filled with unconcealable sorrow. As she spoke, there was even a priest treating a terrible wound on her abdomen. Daylin tried to rush over and delay Archimonde so that more people could escape, but Archimonde just pointed his finger and a black light shot out from his hand and hit Daylin. "What were you doing?" Jaina was furious. Duque stopped her and shook his head. Chapter 875. Lady Goldensword has done her best. Miraculously, Duque's words appeased Jaina, who was about to go berserk. Jaina was silent, but her tears flowed down her face like a dam that had collapsed. Gina Goldensword continued. Archimonde seemed to be venting. After destroying every living creature in his field of vision, he sank to the bottom of the sea again. He may have gone west or south. When I woke up, it was the second squadron of the First Fleet that saved me. Next it was another General Cultivation who narrated. For some reason, Cultivation had also been attacked. However, this time it was not the Scourge but tens of thousands of powerful Naga. Unlike the Naga under Duque, this batch of Naga was ink black in color. Their eyes are blood red just like those berserk orcs. The survivor seemed to have heard that the leader of the Naga was called Vasht. Vasht. Duque blurted out. You know. Jaina grabbed Duque's sleeve almost instantly. Duque smiled bitterly. That's an even more powerful Naga clan in the depths of the endless sea. The Furious Scale clan under me can't even compare to the patrols of the Vasht clan. Jaina did not speak, but she deeply imprinted the name Vasht in her heart. The general continued, the island of Kultiras has been destroyed. His Highness then led the Imperial Guards to launch a desperate charge against Vasht, but was shot to death on the dock on the spot. Many survivors saw it and the young Highness ship was destroyed. No one would have thought that Kultiras would be destroyed almost overnight and the main bloodline would be wiped out. Jaina Goldensword gritted her teeth. Kultiras has been destroyed, but Kultiras is not the first country to be destroyed, and it will probably not be the last. Your Highness Jaina Proudmoore, the heavy responsibility of restoring the country now falls on your shoulders. Your Highness, please ascend the throne as soon as possible and restore Kultiras. In response to her words, the civil and military officials of Kultiras all knelt down. Your Highness Jaina Proudmoore, please ascend the throne. Jaina was silent for a good 5 seconds. She glanced at Duque and wiped the tears off her face. Enthronement. I will. This is my responsibility as Proudmoore's son. But now please leave. I want to be alone with my father. Observing a moment of silence for the ancestors was the right thing to do. A group of generals filed out. Just as Duque was about to step out of the church, Jaina's voice floated from behind him. Duque, give me some time. Maybe 1 or 2 days. I'll leave Theramore and the tribe to you. After saying that, a magic transmitter was tossed into Duque's hand. This was the communicator given to Sal. Duque said solemnly, leave it to me. Closing the door, Duque raised his head and looked at the clear sky. There was a trace of melancholy in his heart. The threat of fate had clearly seemed to have returned, but something like this happened at a time when he didn't expect it to. He didn't know if fate had been messed up by him, or if fate itself didn't listen to him and change the direction of the future. In his memory, although Prince Tandred wasn't very capable after Dalen's death, he managed the half-dead Kultiras with fear and trepidation. He should have lived for a few decades. But now Tandred was dead. Jaina, who had been the uncrowned queen of Theramore, had been homeless for the rest of her life. But now she was about to become the queen of Kultiras. It could only be said that fate was a strange thing. Duque suddenly realized that if he blindly looked at the future according to the original history, he would probably fail miserably. It seemed like there was no need to wait for the tribe to die. The death of a king was definitely a major event. Jaina could immerse herself in sorrow, but Duque couldn't. Time passed quickly as the fleet was reorganized and the wounded were treated. The next morning, the communicator that was given to Sal suddenly began to flash red. Duque gently clenched it and an extremely clear spatial coordinate appeared in Duque's mind. Something happened to Sal? In Grey Valley, Wajin and Sal stayed together. Sal held the communicator in his wide palm. Sal said in a deep voice, Wajin, I still don't think it's a good idea to attract humans. We have never been allies with the Alliance, not in the past, and it will be difficult to be in the future. I don't think humans will face this crisis with us. Jaina's group might choose to give up Theramore and go a little further south. Wujin sighed. He touched his long troll fangs. We have no choice. I don't have high hopes for that Jaina. Although she is a smart person, I always feel that she has a faint hostility towards our tribe. Of course, most alliances are like this. So, if we want to cooperate, we must find someone with greater wisdom. At this moment, Sal suddenly found that the space not far from him began to fluctuate violently. Get out of the way. Varrock waved his hand, dispersing the nearby orc guards. Be careful, it's not Jaina. Wujin could see at a glance that the level of spatial fluctuations was on a completely different level. Sal nervously clenched the hammer of destruction in his hand. At the same time, Rexer beside him also clenched his twin axes. In the next second, a figure that Sal and Rexer were very familiar with appeared in front of them. Seeing Sal's expression, Wujin subconsciously felt that things seemed to be a little delicate. Why is it you? Sal murmured. Why can't it be me? Duque said calmly. Really? That's how I should say it, I'm really flattered. Sal immediately smiled bitterly. He is. Wujin was puzzled. The Alliance's supreme leader, the Alliance's commander-in-chief, Duke Marcus. Rexer said, enunciating each word. Wujin was greatly surprised. Duque actually came in person? Why is this happening? The Alliance has suffered a heavy blow again. Not long ago His Majesty Dalen Proudmoore passed away. Her Highness Jaina has to deal with the aftermath. It seemed like a light sentence, but it did not make Sal feel happy because of the damage the Alliance had suffered. Instead, it made Sal's heart even more heavy. That powerful Alliance. The Alliance that defeated the previously incomparably powerful tribes actually collapsed to this point. Even a monster like Duque could not stop the collapse of the situation. How terrifying was the Scourge army? Sal's heart trembled. Chapter 876. Sal's performance made Wujin extremely worried. Indeed, Sal was very talented as a leader. Before the talent was transformed into an ability, it was just an ability that had not yet been fulfilled. If the commander of the Alliance was not this powerful young mage who claimed to be 29 years old but looked like an 18-year-old, perhaps Sal would have enough room and time to grow. However, looking at Duque, Wujin instantly felt the gap between the two leaders of the Alliance and the Horde. Whether it was personal strength, charm, courage, or temperament, Duque was 9 streets ahead of the 15-year-old Sal. Not every leader had the courage to come alone to the middle of what was once the enemy's formation. After all, they were once enemies and anything could happen. Duke showed up, showing off his courage and insight without any scruples, as well as the strong magical aura around him that was like the sun. If it were an ordinary high elf mage, Wujin would have at least 70% confidence in killing him with his whirlwind blade that had been strengthened by troll witchcraft. Duque. From the moment he appeared, Wujin had an intuition that not only he and Sal, but all the orc guards around them were locked by some unknown mysterious power. As long as they acted rashly, what awaited them would be a thunderous blow that would kill them. This was not an illusion. Rexer seemed to be staring at the side, but his forehead was sweating. Varrock and Brock were both unusually nervous. Only Sal, his intuition sensed something else. Duque had no malicious intentions, at least not now, and Duque had a way to solve the problem. He still remembered what Orgrim had said before his death. Duke Marcus is the most terrifying enemy. You will never know whether or not you are dancing in the palm of his hand, even if you plan a 2-step, 3-step, or even 10-step scheme. Orgrim also said, but he is also a kind and abides by a certain creed. At that time Sal asked why he said that. Orgrim replied, I am, or at least alive. That is an example. He had 1,000 ways to kill me and Rexer after I was captured. But he gave up. So, if I had a choice, I would want to be friends with him, not enemies. Thinking of this, Sal's heart quickly calmed down. His performance made Woking secretly happy. Duque glanced at Sal and said, Don't worry. The Burning Legion that once dominated you beastmen, their commander Archimond is on the way to Kalimdor. On behalf of the Alliance, I can promise the Horde that before we kill Arkherons, the Alliance will not take the initiative to declare war on the Horde. For some reason, even though he didn't want to show it, the moment Duque made the promise, not only Thrall, but the powerhouses like Wujin, Rexer, Brock, and Varric all heaved a sigh of relief. Sal said, All right, for the sake of a common enemy. During this period of time, the Horde wouldn't start a war with the Alliance. Duke Marcus, you have the promise of the current tribal chief. A huge green fist gently bumped into a seemingly small human male fist in midair. Sal turned his head. All right, now let's discuss this. He can't be considered our common enemy. Duque refuted Sal and looked at the huge remains at the scene. Could be seen that this was a very powerful creature when it was alive. His upper body was like a night elf, but his lower body was like a stag. He was more than 3 meters tall and was supported by 4 hoofed legs. His turbid eyes were golden, and his moss-like long hair fell straight to his shoulders. There were leaves and twigs on his hair and beard. There were also 2 large and prominent antlers on his head, which made his more than 3 meters tall body even taller. But he was now dead. The clear axe marks on his body and the ominous energy that was full of a crazy bloody aura around the wound told everyone who the murderer was. Gromhel's roar. Who is he? Sal asked a question he had wanted to ask for a long time. Beastmen were typical outsiders, and it was Wujin's first time coming to Kalimdor. As for the history of Kalimdor, the Horde could only be confused. Duque sighed. What if I told you that Grom, who had fallen into a state of madness, actually killed Cenarius, the forest demigod worshipped by the night elves and many Tauren druids? What would you do? Sal took a deep breath. He could not imagine how the Horde's new friends, the Tauren race, would treat them. Cenarius, the demigod, had lived since the ancient times, and since the beginning of the ancient war he had been working hard to restore the damage to the earth. He constantly used his demigod power to create forests and amber, and was also the nature demigod worshipped by the night elves and Tauren. 10,000 years ago, when the high elves of Azhara opened the gate to Azeroth for the Burning Legion, Cenarius gathered the ancient guardian wild boar Agamagan, the bear brothers Uzer and Usoc, the white deer Malorn, the storm crow Arvina and other immortals to fight against the Burning Legion's Doom Guards, Demon Guards and Eredar wizards. Most of the ancient guardians died, and Cenarius survived under the protection of his father, the White Deer. However, he was targeted by the Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth, who wanted to take revenge on Cenarius for the failure of the first invasion. So he died. More accurately, he died because of the demon's schemes. The orcs' need to build houses and cities led to the orcs cutting trees in the mountains, which easily angered the night elves. The night elves used their unparalleled forest warfare to force the warsong orcs into a corner. At this time, Manaroth only needed to secretly lead the orcs to a spring that had dripped a drop of his high-tier demon blood. In order to survive, Grom and his tribesmen easily drank the demon blood again and became berserk fell orcs. Then the tragedy happened naturally. Sal could totally imagine how angry and crazy the night elves would be when their demigod was killed. Even if the night elves were as strong as the high elves, their counterattack was not something that the tribe with only 100,000 people could withstand. At this time, an ethereal voice that Duque did not expect sounded in the air. Young chief, don't worry too much. As long as you can find the real murderer, the Lord of the Abyss Manaroth, and kill him, the night elves will forgive you. Moreover, all of your races now have a bigger and more terrifying common enemy, the commander of the Burning Legion, Archimonde. Sal and Duque were speechless at the same time. Prophet. Medivh. Chapter 877. Life with cheats was so empty, lonely and cold. Of course. Duque was speechless as he looked at the guy in front of him who was wearing a big brown cloak. His name was Mysterious Prophet X, which was also known as Medivh. Damn it. He was so used to being a charlatan that he almost forgot that there was an Azeroth charlatan Medivh here. Duque was also speechless about Medivh. Before the third battle of the Dark Portal, Medivh was a scam. Not only did he open the Dark Portal after being possessed, he even left a huge mess for the entire Alliance to deal with. However, before the third battle began, Medivh had predicted or perhaps seen the arrival of the Calamity Army. Regardless of whether he saw the incurable disease of the Rotterdam Kingdom or something else, he had informed several important people that the Rotterdam Kingdom was hopeless, and that they should escape if they didn't want to be on the sinking ship. In the Eastern Kingdom, he had at least perfectly convinced Thrall, who wanted to strategically evacuate from the Rotterdam Kingdom, and Jaina, who had nowhere to go. In this life, he had at least made the Iron Furnace Castle and Stormwind City more actively prepare for war. If they didn't prepare for war in advance, How could Stormwind City send troops to the South Sea city-state within a week? Don't even think about it. Even though Duque had promoted the development of a lot of advanced technology such as railway transportation, it would take at least 2 weeks to gather the food needed for the army. However, since Medivh was such a charlatan, why didn't he think of a way to hide a few paladins in the Rotterdam Kingdom when the Fool returned to the Rotterdam Kingdom? At that time, Second Fool had not completely fallen. With his half-baked Death Knight skills, if Uther, Mograine, Sidan and the other macho men were all there, it would be a group of holy knights surrounding Arthas and using holy light, small hammers to hammer his chest. Even if the Fool had F-cup chest muscles, he would still be hammered to an A-. On the other hand, Duque was convinced by Medivh's ability to persuade the night elves, orcs and humans to join forces. The appearance of the Medivh stunned the people of the tribe. Then Sal took the lead. They all punched their chests and bowed. "Greetings, Prophet." Duque was speechless at the formality of their etiquette. It was understandable. To the tribe, Medivh was definitely a great benefactor. Without Medivh's reminder, the horde might not have risen up so quickly. If it was too late, the horde would have been devoured by the Calamity army, or they would have been used as cannon fodder by the Alliance. The Orc Slave Legion would have been forced to fight against the Sea of Zombies. How could it compare to jumping out of the Alliance's traditional sphere of influence and opening a new city in a new continent? If the tribe was given a few more years to stabilize themselves, they would be able to compete with the Alliance. Duque was very unhappy about this. Unfortunately, there was nothing he could do. Medivh had such a heavy taste. Oh, it was universal love. He actually got together with the female orc, Garona, and even gave birth to a mixed-blood titan orc and human Medivh. Duque was already giving him face by not calling Medivh a traitor. Alright, whether or not a traitor was a traitor would be up to the later generations of historians to judge. Duque couldn't care less. He couldn't split the Burning Legion when they were facing a great enemy. Seeing Medivh, Duque also bowed. Seeing you again, I'm sure both of us have complicated feelings. Medivh sighed. Once upon a time, Duque was just a small magic apprentice. He had outstanding talent, but was very far from the Breaking Dawn level. Duque was so close to becoming Medivh's disciple. Although he didn't know if that was a blessing or a curse. The last time they met, he was already on the verge of death. Apart from some important instructions, he didn't say anything else. Who knew that after 15 years, the brat from back then would become the pillar of the Alliance today? Medivh walked over and sighed again. Duque, you did well. I'm very pleased. If the Alliance didn't have you, the situation would be 100 times worse. But I think that since you sent an emissary to warn the Night Elves, you should agree with my plan to unite the Night Elves, the Alliance, and the Horde to deal with the most powerful and terrifying enemy, the Arc-Herons. Duque shrugged. With you there, I feel that sending Ronan was unnecessary. Medivh shook his head. No, with the Alliance's emissary as proof as well as the magic fragments you sent Ronan. I managed to convince Tyrant 3 days faster than I expected. With the Burning Legion able to reach Kalimdor at any time, even an hour is precious, let alone a day. But even if the Night Elves don't pursue the matter of Grom killing Cenarius, the Horde won't abandon our compatriots. Sar's words were immediately echoed by the other beastmen. Yes. We beastmen won't abandon any of our compatriots. Lexa raised his axe. We won't sit by and watch as the Warsong tribe is destroyed, Varrock replied. Is there no way to save Grom? Brock and the other beastmen shouted. Medivh frowned. I can teach you a magic formation that can purify the demon blood in the Warsong beastmen. But I've already lost most of my magic, so... Duque took the initiative. I'll set up the magic formation. Then what? Medivh looked at Sar, Duque and the others. We have to make sure that Grom isn't injured as much as possible, and it's best if he's conscious when he enters the magic formation. The more heavily injured he is, or if he's unconscious, the weaker his willpower will be. The more corrosive the demon blood will be to his soul and body. After all, this isn't the first time he's drunk demon blood. If it gets worse this time, he'll never be able to get rid of the demon blood addiction. Sar and the others were suffering. Even though Grom Hellscream was a little old now, he was still the undisputed #1 warrior of the entire tribe. This wasn't a title he'd given himself. It was a battle record he'd earned. Along the way, Lexa, Varrock, Brock and the others who didn't use pets were no match for Grom. As a hero of the older generation, Grom knew very well that a wise leader was needed to lead the tribe in times of crisis. Thus he was like a door god, blocking all the beastmen's path of challenging Sar with Makra. He was so strong that Sar had originally prepared for a group of strong beastmen to knock Grom out with hammers and drag him back. Even so, there was only a 50% chance of success. No one knew how ferocious Grom would be after drinking the devil's blood again. Now he was saying that they couldn't knock him out or seriously injure him. What could they do? The beastmen were all dumbfounded. "Let me go," Duque suddenly said. Chapter 878. The situation was very clear. It was not that the horde would not act until they saw the rabbit, but that there was no way to deal with Manaroth. The orcs would always feel that someone was holding a dagger to their carotid artery. This was the second time that the orcs had been tricked into drinking demon blood. Moreover, Manaroth was the vanguard of the Burning Legion. If he was not dealt with, the army could not be assembled at all. Since they were going to save Lord Howl, Grom anyway, it was better for Duque to be generous and let him handle it. As for the magic circle, the horde was confused. At this point in time, the horde had yet to establish contact with the shaman in their hometown. Even Sal himself was just a standard warrior, and he was not the powerful person who cultivated both magic and martial arts in the future. Duque easily found a magic node in Grey Valley, which was a moon well. He then released dozens of hands of magic and set up a dazzling magic circle. Seeing this scene, the horde fell into silence. Wujin gently encouraged Sal, "Don't be discouraged. The lifespan of humans is short, and a monstrous talent like Duke might not appear in 1,000 years." In other words, Sal was younger. At most he could wait until Duke died, then Sal would be able to make a name for himself. The alliance is too strong. The rise of the horde depends on your decision, young chief. Sal nodded heavily. 50 meters away, a cross-shaped vein appeared on Duke's forehead. Although they were far apart and Wujin deliberately spoke in the troll language that Sal could understand, the system elf's wide listening range and the ferocity of the translation software were too much for him to handle. "Hey, if I say that I'm immortal if I don't die at the hands of the demon, will your horde collectively jump into the sea and commit suicide?" Yes. Calm down, calm down. The magic circle did not require much effort. Rather than saying it was a magic circle, it was more like a simple exorcism circle. As long as there was enough Stratholme holy water and moon well, everything else was only auxiliary. The moon well was a good thing. As the name suggested, the moon well was inextricably linked to the Well of Eternity. It turned out that after the Well of Eternity exploded 10,000 years ago, the energy of the well water formed the Azeroth magic web that we are familiar with today, while some other scattered energy was scattered all over the world. Hence, the Night Elves rebuilt the scattered energy into the moon well to serve the Night Elves. Legend had it that the moon goddess slept in the Well of Eternity during the day. The Night Elves believed in the moon goddess, so they named the wells created by the scattered energy of the Well of Eternity as moon wells. As the purest energy liquid, as long as the moon well wasn't overly polluted, it would have a purifying effect. Duque still remembered the days when he used to purify devil cloth into moon cloth to earn some money in the game. Once everything was settled, Duque spent about an hour to catch up to Grom and his warsong beastmen under the guidance of Lex's scouts. He dismounted from the wyvern and looked into the distance. They had just attacked a night elf base and the fell orcs were wildly destroying it. Duke Marcus, seeing that, they will also be participating in the upcoming war against the Burning Legion. Please try not to hurt them. Lexa said in a low, muffled voice. You don't have to tell me, I will. Duque walked toward the camp filled with flames and blood without looking back. On the other side, kill. Ow 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 ow. A dark green-skinned night elf hunter stared at the sky with grievances. She had died a long time ago. She and her compatriots had died here after failing to fend off the fell orcs with all their might. However, the fell orcs controlled by the devil's blood did not let them go. Even in death, the fell orcs continued to attack the corpses as if they were going to chop their corpses into pieces. Suddenly the sky and earth darkened. A cold wind that seemed to come out of nowhere instantly extinguished the fire here, causing every fell orc to shiver. A huge illusion of Duque that was at least 15 meters tall appeared at the entrance of the camp. A voice amplified by magic rang out. Seeing the figure of the human mage with his cloak fluttering in the wind, almost every fell orc's scarlet pupils shrank. especially Grom's hell scream. Duque's familiar and hated face easily evoked memories buried in his heart. Duque held his hands flat, palms facing up, looking like a clergyman ready to hug a lost sheep. Of course, in the eyes of the fell orcs, this was an extremely disgusting scene. Duque spoke, and with every sentence his huge illusion took a step forward. Who is it? Who foiled the Horde's plot to occupy Azeroth? Who is it? Let millions of Horde die in battle in another world, become bait in the sea, become rotten meat on the yellow soil? Who is it? Defeated the great Chief Orgrim in your hearts and turned him into a prisoner? Who is it? You were trapped in the wilderness for 13 years and lived a miserable life, living in fear every single day? Who else? Let hundreds of thousands of your compatriots become slaves. Let the next generation of beastmen grow up in a cage. 5 questions, one sharper and more provocative than the last. Not to mention Grom's hell scream and his war song fell orcs in the camp. Even Rexer, who was watching this scene from afar, could not help but tremble with anger. Sure enough, in the next moment, Duque announced the answer himself. The one who defeated the Horde was me. The one who made millions of Horde warriors die in battle was me. The one who dealt with your former great Chief Orgrim was me. The one who made you unable to own any land and could only live in pain every day in fear of being besieged was me. The one who made the former warriors become human slaves was still me. At this point, the huge illusion of Duque showed an extremely evil smile that absolutely deserved a beating. Who am I? Am I not the great enemy of your Horde, Duke Marcus? Rexer, who was far away, knew that this was a type of provocation. He knew that Duque was now an ally of the Horde, but he just could not help but have the urge to hack Duque to death. If his clear-headed Horde was like this, how could the fell orcs, who were a little too hot-headed, endure it? Duque's illusion arrogantly swept his finger across the entire field. I am not targeting any of you. I am referring to all the fell orcs here. You are all trash, not satisfied. Come and bite me. Chapter 879. For a moment Rexer's brain froze. In his impression, Duque was always so calm and collected, with the demeanor of a great general, a great commander. He always used light commands to send a large number of orcs to hell. Whether it was the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, or the recent battle of the Dalagen. Although the tribe had not figured it out before, how could they not think that Duque had deliberately given them heavy two-handed holy light weapons and dragged the tribe down with him? His ability to include enemies and enemies who were not his allies made the higher-ups of every tribe tremble in fear. That was why Rexer had always subconsciously thought that Duque was the kind of sinister pretty boy that the humans talked about. When had he ever seen a Storm Duke and the commander of the Alliance act like such a ruffian? On the other hand, even though he knew that everything Duque said was the truth, Rexer was still furious. He knew that Duque was helping the tribe to provoke him and taunt him. Moreover, it was a group taunt. Even if he was angry, he could only swallow it. The pain of being implicated made Rexer grit his teeth as if he had a toothache. Rexer and the clear-headed scouts were already so angry, let alone the half-crazed fell orcs. Duque was an enemy to begin with. Duque's words were also asking for a beating. Then what was there to think about? Him. It was like a large bucket of ice water had been thrown into a pot of boiling oil. Including Grom, the fell orcs were completely enraged. A classic Loch Tar. The green tide formed by the fell orcs charged directly at the virtual image of Duque. Kill. 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 Tear him apart. Kill Duke Marcus. The virtual image of Duque, who had just taunted them, turned around and ran without any heroic spirit. Running away after acting cool, how exciting. The scouts here had made a big mistake. There were not 5,000 fell orcs nearby but nearly 10,000. Behind them were nearly 10,000 fell orcs with their weapons raised, madly chasing after Duque. In front of him was the incomparably bitter Rexer. Lexa had never imagined that the sound of close to 10,000 evil beastmen roaring at the same time would be so shocking. It actually scared the wyverns so much that they flew into the sky and refused to come down. According to the original plan, they would sit on the wyverns and flee while letting Duque continue to release illusions to lure the violent guys on the ground. When Lexa finally managed to summon the wyvern, it was struck by Grom's flying axe and there was nothing else to be done. The problem was that there were two pitiful figures leading a group of guards who had been driven out of the forest by the evil beastmen. Woking. Thrall? Lex's eyes almost popped out. He immediately understood that Sal and Woking were still worried and had secretly followed him. Sigh. Duque showed an expression of infinite sorrow as he ran. That's a very, very long story. You just need to know that I train these muscles to deal with two deadly fairies. That's enough. Sal's head was full of question marks. Duque looked up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, and tears seemed to be streaming down his cheeks. Once when he patted Sasha's butt, Sasha would wonder, "What are you doing?" However, when he later patted Sasha's butt, she knew how to change positions and the two fairies could not hold back. It was easier said than done to deal with two combat faction fairies. In addition to the wealth of knowledge from 10 terabytes of action movies, it was still that saying, "To forge iron one must be strong." In the past 10 years, Duque began a long journey of training. From a muscular otaku to a university animal, he trained into a bodybuilder. Do you think without a six-pack you can easily complete the 48 hands? So the two leaders of the alliance and the tribe began to run toward the sunset. As if chasing after my lost youth. Chapter 880. Just like that, in the spirit of sharing weal and woe, the bosses of the Alliance and the Horde established a deep friendship in this unexpected ultramarathon for a reason that was not laughable. It would be strange. Yes, during the process, both sides exchanged friendly glances that were similar to "believe it or not, I'll get rid of you later." Of course, Thrall and the rest also called Duque a monster in their hearts. After all, it wasn't that Thrall had never seen what a human great wizard was like. At that time, when a morning star came to the arena, everyone stood up, with more than a dozen guards clearing the way and knight followers at their side. Then a middle-aged wizard in his 40s had to be supported up and down the stairs. When he got on a carriage, a servant had to kneel down and use his back as a stepping board and then shakily get on. Most wizards were still young, but they were already holding a pot of medicine all day, like old men with one foot in the grave. When it came to Duque, the contrast was too great. Wasn't this the case? You're a respected Breaking Dawn wizard. Not only did you not bring your followers to a group of orcs, your endurance was even better than most of them. What the hell was this? No, this had nothing to do with wizards. Looking at Duque's nimble steps that seemed to be dancing in the air, Thrall was certain that Duque had learned the Elven Ranger's ways. "Sir Marcus, although I have no intention of prying into your secrets, your endurance, speed and agility amaze me." Thrall still asked. It's nothing. When you have two women by your side who are the strongest rangers in the world, in order to prove that you are a man, you will practice such skills." Duque raised his head 60 degrees to the sky, and 2 lines of illusory tears flowed from the corners of his eyes. Almost immediately, Thrall felt that Duque was a man with a story. That was a sweet nightmare that had lasted for 10 years. The past was unbearable. Duque's gaze seemed to have traveled through time and space, returning to the past. "Honey, do sit-ups. I'll kiss you every time you come up." Aurelia gently pressed her knees against Duque's feet. Because she was holding Duque's ankles lightly, every time Duque got up, he could see Aurelia's sweet smile, kisses, and the pair of hygel peaks that didn't match the style of the elves. Come and chase me. As long as you catch up to me or run a kilometer, I'm willing to unlock it for you." Yes. Force. Sasha ran in front of Duque with a bashful expression. She wore a thin veil and swayed her seductive figure in front of Duque. All kinds of, "if you're a man, do whatever you want," drove Duque, this lazy worm who had no motivation in life, to work hard. Unknowingly, 10 years had passed. In reality, after the first year, Duke could already beat up the Windstalker sisters until they cried for their parents, screaming that they didn't want him anymore. But for some reason, with Aurelia and Sasha constantly changing the prizes, he persisted for 10 years. Although Duque showed off his affection and almost forced Gavin Rad to be a virgin to a 10-meter-tall virgin, things were different now. Without considering his profession skills, with just Duque's skills, he could definitely kick open the gate of Sarsgaard camp and shout in orc language, "I want to fight 10 of you." Then he would clean up a circle of people and walk out safely. The long run would eventually come to an end. From morning to evening, after listening to Grom's roar for nearly 8 hours, After Duque, I'll kill you. Xian finally lost his temper. Duque finally flipped out. In front of a huge well that emitted a blue glow, Duque stopped in his tracks. He ignored Sar and the others who had scattered to the side, ignored the nearly 10,000 evil orcs who were clamoring non-stop, and looked straight at the face of Grom Hellscream, whose mind was a little unclear. Duque arrogantly raised his left middle finger at Lord Howl with the international gesture. Well, actually, he was showing Lord Howl the ring on his finger with the Marcus family's emblem on it. Then he hooked his right index finger. Grom, didn't you want to kill me? Come on. In the wind, Duque's seemingly thin body seemed like it could be blown away. Coupled with the evil smile on his face, it looked like he was courting death. Sar had a feeling that Duque would succeed. Sure enough, after Duque's provocation, the tribe's #1 warrior, Grom Hellscream, roared and let out a thunderous roar. Then he jumped high into the air. Leap slash. Grom had practiced and used a seemingly ordinary attack skill that exposed his own weakness no less than 1,000,000 times. After practicing it 1,000,000 times, even the most ordinary of moves would produce an unimaginable sublimation. It was a move that surpassed a warrior's skills and violated most of the common sense of physics. When Grom's burly body jumped to the height of a 5-story building, his axe, which was glowing with a bloody light, suddenly began to accelerate unscientifically. If the initial momentum was like a meteor falling to the ground, then the second half was like crossing dozens of meters of space and arriving in the blink of an eye. Great Chief Sar could not imagine how Duque could survive this move. In previous sparring sessions, even if Grom held back, Sar could only strenuously block the hammer of destruction and use his physical strength to withstand it. Because there was no way to dodge. What about Duque? Sar was in a daze for a moment. If Duque could not dodge and Grom killed Duque with his axe, would he be able to help the tribe eliminate this enemy of the alliance? Unfortunately, Sar was destined to be disappointed. In a berserk state, Grom's attack speed and power increased exponentially, but his moves had too many flaws, and the direction and path of his attacks were extremely obvious. The moment he jumped, the system elf had already mapped out Grom's path of attack in Duke's mind. It had also calculated the damage and area of effect that would be caused when the axe smashed into the ground. Under the simulation of this supercomputer's tactical system, Grom's attack was more like a clown trying to make people laugh. Shrill and violent wind-breaking noises sounded. As expected, Grom's blood roar slammed into the ground, creating huge spiderweb-like cracks that would make anyone's heart tremble. Unfortunately, it didn't hit. Duke moved half a body away in an incomparably confident manner, seemingly dodging the attack by a hair's breadth. However, his mocking and extremely calm face was deeply imprinted in the hearts of Sar, Rexer, Wajin, Varrock, Brock, and the other powerful warriors of the tribe. Duque made his move. Chapter 881. As the #1 warrior of the Horde, Grom's roar was extremely powerful when he was in a berserk state. It was an astonishing momentum that set off monstrous waves crashing against the greenish-black reefs on the coast. Even if the reefs in front of him seemed indestructible, there was a feeling that they could be destroyed in one blow. However, Duque was clearly a mage who had nothing to do with melee professions. Very suddenly, his every movement was like a powerful warrior who looked down on everyone. Everyone could predict that Duque's counterattack would come in the next moment. Like a seagull hunting for food in a storm, after dodging the powerful and crazy waves crashing against the shore, Duke's secretive, arrogant, confident and elegant demeanor. In the eyes of 1,000 powerful fighters, 10,000 different flavors could be read. Cao was so shocked that he couldn't speak. So, this is the true appearance of the ultimate warrior who cultivates magic and martial arts in this world? It was about to come in the next moment. The long and huge blood howl slammed into the ground, and black sand suddenly rose into the air as if even time had stopped. In that instant, Grom's terrifying attack, which seemed to be able to shatter a mountain, was smashed into smithereens by a seemingly slender arm. The jaws of every Horde member dropped to the ground. They felt the same way about the human male arm that was much thinner than a beastman's. It passed through Grom's blood-red light and pressed against his rough face. It was as if it was a gigantic iron hook instead of Duke's arm. Even with Wajin's sharp eyes and wisdom, he only saw the fact that Grom was caught, but he didn't see how Duque caught Grom. It was too shocking. Being able to press his hand on Grom's face meant that he could also kill Grom in one move. If they could dodge Grom's first attack perfectly, they could do it too. But Duque was a mage. Wu Jin felt like his mind was in a mess. Didn't that mean that Duke Marcus also had the strength of a hero in the field of melee combat? Wu Jin suddenly discovered something that warriors could not see. There was a faint magical light on the streamlined muscles of Duque's arm. The light formed lines like some kind of exquisite inscription, branded on Duque's arm. Even Duque's robe could not completely conceal this layer of light. When Duque used his magic power, the magic elements in the air seemed to be divided into 12 strands, and they seemed to be pouring into Duque's arm at the same time. In the end, Wu Jin even felt that the magic elements were pushing Duque's arm toward Grom's big face. Repent for your lack of calmness and flaws. Repent for your lack of calmness and flaws. Ha. Ha. The muscles in Duque's right arm expanded, and the strength of his legs, waist and arms combined with his breaking dawn magic power pushed Grom, whose facial muscles were already distorted, more than 10 meters away. He heavily dragged a huge black mark on the ground mixed with traces of blood. Then when he hit the wall of the moon well, Duque used the momentum of the impact to lift Grom up, and then pressed his head into the crystal blue well water that was knee-deep. At the same time, the magic formation was completely activated. Countless rays of silver light surged from all directions, hovering above the moon well and finally converging on Duque's arm. White light shone everywhere. Traces of blood energy began to dissipate in the air with a shrill cry. "Wake up, idiot!" Gugugu, the number 1 warrior of the tribe, struggled as the strengthened moon well water kept pouring into him. A few seconds later, the incomparably nervous thrall saw Grom's arms suddenly stop struggling. The great chief felt a heart-wrenching pain in his chest. Was that nervousness? Was that heartache? Thrall couldn't tell. Then the group of orcs looked at Grom, who had his head buried in the well water, and suddenly pushed Duque's arm away. Duque bared his teeth but still retreated while panting heavily. Everyone saw Grom sit up with a crash and then give Duque a look of disgust. Thrall was not angry but delighted. Grom. Grom looked at Thrall, Lexa, and the rest who were rushing towards him, and then at Duque, who was panting heavily by the well. How could the awakened Grom not know what had happened? Although he had fallen into madness and chaos not long ago, this did not mean that he had completely lost his memories. Thinking about how he had drunk the demon's blood to survive, and how he had fallen even deeper into madness after killing the nature element demigod, Grom's expression was very interesting. He then thought about how the one who had pulled him out of the abyss of pain and madness was actually Duke Marcus, whom he had wanted to kill and dismember 10,000 times over for the past 10 years. Grom's expression became even more interesting. It was a boundless sense of shame that made him want to chop himself on the head, and then fall into a mass grave to die a clean death. No, my sister. Grom, a man of steel who would not shed a single tear even if his parents died, his brothers all died, and he was slashed hundreds of times, suddenly burst into tears. Thrall finally rushed over and hugged the bawling Grom tightly. He patted his broad back and said, "It's okay now, Grom. It's okay." Grom did not seem to notice Thrall hugging him. Instead, he stared at Duque, who was sitting on the wall of the well and smiling mysteriously at him. Duke Marcus, why did you save me?" If it had been any other strong person in the tribe who had saved him, Grom would not have been so annoyed. But only Duque. He could not accept it at all. "Why? You ask me why?" Duque spread his hands, his face full of ridicule. "One of the most powerful demons in the Burning Legion, Archimonde, is on the way to Kalimdor. This is not an opponent that the Alliance can deal with alone. And your chief insisted that he would not join this temporary alliance against the Burning Legion unless he saved you. If you have to thank someone, thank Thrall." Grom was silent. Anyone would think that he was a volcano that was about to erupt. "Calm down, Grom. At least at this time, Duque and the Alliance are indispensable allies for us. If the world of Azeroth is destroyed, we won't gain anything," Thrall said anxiously. Chapter 882. Grom calmly pushed Thrall away with his immense strength. Lying in the clear moon well water, Grom stood in front of Duque, clenched his teeth and finally said, I may have fallen into madness, but I remember everything clearly. You could have used underhanded methods against me, but you chose the most honorable method. I don't want to admit it, but I have to admit that I owe you a favor. Duke leisurely crossed his legs, let out a chuckle and then replied, Favor? Very good. I need a powerful vanguard cannon fodder in the upcoming battle of Mount Hyjal. Live until then. As long as Archimonde is dead, I don't care if you live or die. Your favor will be repaid. Grom's swollen muscles seemed to have calmed down and retracted, but everyone knew that Grom Hellscream had made a vow as a man. Thrall's body trembled. Then he walked over and bowed to Duque with Wajin and the rest of the Horde's higher-ups. Duke Marcus, no matter what the grievances between the Alliance and the Horde are, at least this time we are grateful to you. You are a true gentleman outside of the battlefield. In the system notification, Duque's eyes widened as he saw that his reputation in Orgrimmar had become respect. Damn, I, a human, actually got the respect of the Horde's main city. Could there be anything more illogical? Duque felt a little awkward. He coughed lightly and changed the topic. Quickly take care of Manoroth. We'll meet up with the Night Elves representative and discuss how to deal with Archimonde. With that, Duque turned and left. On the other side, Grom roared with his famous lung capacity, You bunch of idiots, are you done being crazy? If you are, come over and drink the water from the moon well. The Horde needs you to be clear-headed. The Warsong orcs, who had just recovered from the shock of the magic formation but were still not fully awake, were obedient like grandsons under the command of their chief. They eagerly came over to drink Grom's bathwater. To be precise, it was the water from the moon well after someone fell down. Of course, the orcs, who were never particular about hygiene, didn't care about such details and drank it all the same. After living a barbaric life, every orc's stomach was like an incinerator. After everything was over, Duque and the tribe's experts gathered again. Thrall said, I have obtained the guidance of the prophet. According to the curse left in Grom's body, we can trace it back to the source and find the Lord of the Abyss, Manoroth. As long as we can kill him, the bloodthirsty curse that has plagued the orcs for a long time can be removed. At the mention of this brutal and crazy bloodthirsty curse, the expressions of almost every beastman of the older generation changed. The new generation of beastmen might not be able to understand it, but only the first batch of beastmen who had drunk the demon's blood would understand how terrifying the impulse to destroy and slaughter every night was. Destruction. Slaughter. Fresh blood. It was like a traveler dying of thirst in the desert, thirsting for water. Everything was so crazy yet so natural. Grom had once thought that the ancient tree in front of him was Duque when he was half awake. He had used his fists and claws to smash the tree into pieces, even tearing out the roots and using his fangs to bite them off. Yes, in the illusion he had bitten off Duque's neck. However, Duke was standing in front of him. He knew that he shouldn't attack Duke, and this human with a faint, confident smile had done him a favor. Grom was extremely conflicted. However, he still had to do what he had to do. Moreover, he had to break the orc's fate of being controlled by the Burning Legion. After this incident and seeing his compatriots easily fall into madness under the influence of the demon's blood, Thrall clearly understood that he had to cut off the source of this curse. At this moment, Thrall, who was still in the whirlpool of fate, did not know that he was fated to lose Grom Hellhowl, the strongest of the Horde. Let's go. Duque stood up, letting his blue and white cape flutter in the wind. The final result was very different from the original history. Worried about the curse's influence on the previous generation of orcs, not only did they not bring ordinary soldiers, but Varrock and Brock also stayed at the border between the Barren Lands and Grey Valley. The final members of the Abyssal Lord's team were Thrall, Grom, Duque and Wajin. Grom gripped the blood curse sensor that Mediv had given him. In his field of vision everything changed. The world turned black and white. Then, a wisp of bloody mist that should have been invisible to the naked eye floated toward him from afar like a thin silk veil. Finally, it connected to his chest. Follow me. Grom carried Bloodhowl and strode towards the land of destiny. No matter how terrifying the demon lord was waiting for him, he knew that he had to go. That was his duty, Grom Hellhowl. It was also his destiny. Surprisingly, Manoroth's location was not too far from the entrance of Grey Valley, but it was very well hidden. Without Grom leading the way, Perhaps even the local night elves would not know that there was a small valley between the mountain streams that was completely unaffected by the outside world. Less than 500 meters into the valley, the entire scenery changed. It was no longer lush and lush like in Grey Valley, full of birds and fragrant flowers. Instead, it was filled with the color of defeat. The entire sky suddenly turned from a sunny morning into a dark and gloomy midnight. Evidently, the evil magic of the Abyssal Lord was affecting the surrounding space. His eyes were filled with lava. Amidst the grayish-black volcanic ash, there were countless vague lava streams that flowed from top to bottom. High temperature. Their nostrils were filled with the sulfuric smell of the burning plains, and their feet were full of volcanic ash that squeaked when they stepped on it. Mixed with a large amount of evil magic, the fire elements rolled irregularly in the air, and the turbid smell was nauseating. Not to mention Thrall and Grom, who did not have very strong senses, even the extremely sensitive forest troll hero Wujin, and Duque, who had the help of the system elf, could not sense the existence of Manaroth. Suddenly there was light in this blazing world. It was a terrifying sword light that seemed to be able to split the entire world in half. A double-headed greatsword more than 15 meters long broke out of the volcanic ash under their feet and easily attacked Wujin and Duque at the back of the team. Wujin was seriously injured in just one move. Chapter 883. Woking had never been a flimsy man. The troll looked thin, but that was purely because of his body proportions. Even though he looked thin, Wujin's arms were still thicker than Duque's thighs. Wujin, who was 2.3 meters tall, was half a body taller than Duke, who had grown to 1.83 meters in the void, perhaps because he ate something wrong. Despite being an agility-type hero, Wujin was still hit by the terrifying greatsword. If Wujin had not used his signature long rod and spinning blade to block the attack, no matter how strong the troll's regeneration was, he wouldn't have been able to save him. Like a cannonball, Wujin was sent flying 100 meters away and directly left the stage. Originally, the trajectory of the cold crescent sword light from Manaroth's giant sword had also covered Duke. However, the Lord of the Abyss did not expect that Duke, who should not have been able to react in time, would not have used flash, or ice block, to save his life. Instead, he leaned back as far as he could and got into an iron plank position to avoid this fatal attack. This gave Duque precious time to counterattack. Behind, following Duque's roar, Thrall and Grom, who were the vanguard, immediately reacted. When they turned around, they saw Duque throw out a gorgeous magic brilliance like a waterfall and hit the Lord of the Abyss. It was like a waterfall from the ground to the sky. The dazzling golden flame shockwave was mixed with the holy light that should not belong to a mage. However, it was not enough. After the huge double-headed greatsword failed to cut Duke, under the control of the huge arm filled with explosive power, it spun around and stabbed into the ground. A scarlet shockwave exploded in front of the huge body of the Lord of the Abyss. Completely unable to withstand it, Duque could only flash and retreat to Grom's side. At this moment, Manaroth, who had crawled out of the ground, showed his terrifying figure. The history books described the Lords of the Abyss as an outstanding power that could destroy all life. These huge, dragon-like fellows with a pair of repulsive wings came from the netherworld, the farthest corner of the universe. As for Manaroth, he was the cream of the crop. His entire body felt extremely bloated, and his lower body was more like a pot-bellied four-legged lizard. From the tip of his stomach to the tip of his tail, he was at least 20 meters long. His upper body was full of fat and he looked like a human fatty. There was a huge armor that looked like a kite shield hanging from his belly button. His upper body was bare, but he wore 2 shoulder pads that were full of sharp spikes. He had a pair of huge curved horns that looked like mammoths and a big mouth full of fangs, which made him look extremely ferocious. The Abyss Lord looked at the young Sal and let out a chilling laugh. He. Sal, I knew you would come. I also saw that you brought the powerful Hellscream with you. His blood belongs to me. So does your entire pitiful race. The only thing I didn't expect was that you would bring the Burning Legion's biggest problem in Azeroth, Duke Marcus. Very good. You're really good. Green saliva dripped down from the intersecting fangs. When the saliva dripped onto the volcanic ash, it actually made a creaking sound similar to acid corroding the ground. Sal couldn't help but narrow his eyes. This young chief of the horde suddenly took a step forward and slammed the famous hammer of destruction on the ground. Bang! Sand and stones flew everywhere. This wasn't a meaningless venting. This was the beastmen's favorite way to boost their spirits. After roaring, Sal shouted, "Duque, I'll go first." Duque replied in a low voice, "I'll cover." This was the first real cooperation between the two leaders of the alliance and the horde. Last time when the Dalajan besieged Arthes, Sal, who lacked a proper weapon, was more of a bystander. However, this time, the cooperation between the two was as seamless as if they had worked together thousands of times before. 1024 hands of magic appeared in the air in an instant. The sudden burst of icy arrow rain made the temperature of the entire world suddenly drop by more than 20 degrees, from the hot midsummer into the biting cold winter. Thrall swung the hammer of destruction, like a meteor hammer when the ice crystals pierced through the void and stabbed into the huge body of the Lord of the Abyss. The large square-headed hammer that was larger than a human head began to bloom with a dazzling light. A moment ago it was just like the light of a lighthouse in the night, and the next second, it was already a small sun full of destructive power. Ha-dash! The air in the lungs was compressed by the strong muscles, as if every milliliter of air was converted into oxygen to support the next blow. Sal used all his strength to throw the hammer of destruction. Just as the Lord of the Abyss was busy defending against Duke's breaking dawn magic, the hammer of destruction arrived before he could recover. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion. Even with Manarath's huge body, the powerful destructive power of the hammer of destruction still forced him to take 3 big steps back. Unfortunately, even with the full power of the hammer of destruction, it still could not break the defense of the thick hide of the Lord of the Abyss. Ha ha ha. Manarath laughed wildly. Although it's a good effort, unfortunately it's meaningless. The next moment, the huge Lord of the Abyss charged over faster and fiercer than a rhinoceros. Boom! The double-headed giant sword emitting an evil aura easily smashed the limestone ground the size of a basketball court into pieces. The powerful shockwave sent Sal flying, who had clearly dodged the attack, and Duque had to flash dozens of meters away again. The powerful shockwave also flipped Grom over. Manarath's huge body stood in front of Grom Hellscream and laughed sinisterly. "That child Sal believes that you will definitely be saved. But he does not know what is burning in the depths of your soul. When that thing is in your heart, you will know that we are actually all the same." The murmur burrowed deep into Grom's chest, pierced his heart and plucked at the weakest chord in his soul. It was a string that could easily cause him to fall into madness and slaughter with just a slight tug. His soul was falling. His soul was falling. He found that his body and soul seemed to be enjoying this desperate, painful and sweet madness. No! Grom let out a roar that sounded like it came from hell. Chapter 884. Beastmen will never be slaves. The deafening roar resounded through the entire Grey Valley, sending all the rocks that were still unstable in the surroundings flying. Grom started sprinting at high speed. The anger pumped out of his heart burned through his entire body. The anger that had accumulated in his chest needed a place to vent. The unyielding will hidden in the depths of his soul drove him. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. His well-trained sense of distance told him that it was enough. He stomped hard on the ground with his left leg, and his burly green body soared into the sky with an aura that defied gravity. The blood roar that was held high gave people the illusion that it was going to burst through the gray sky. That was not his attack alone. That was the beastman's struggle against fate. That was the race's endless desire for the future. He waved his hands and the axe flew up. The blood moon rose and the axe flashed. From the battle against Golan in the mountains of Draenor to the Blood War Alliance in the vast lands of Azeroth, Grom Hellhowl had traversed hundreds of thousands of miles between 2 worlds and 3 lands with Bloodhowl. He had never feared anyone. 1 axe to split the world who did not recognize him. The curved axe light. At first it looked like a blood moon, but it suddenly became a rainbow that traversed space and time. Everyone could see that the axe did not change and everyone could see the trajectory of the axe. But even though they could see it, they could not block it. The Lord of the Abyss, Manarath, was not a light human or elf. He was a huge demon that weighed more than 10 tons. From the start he had felt that something was wrong. As the loyal dog of the Arc-Herons and the vanguard of the Burning Legion, he had destroyed countless planets and destroyed countless races that he saw as inferior. He had traversed the universe for 3,000 years, but he had never seen such a brilliant axe light. Manoroth did not know how much damage he would suffer if he was hit by Grom's axe. He did not dare to imagine it. He roared and swung his huge double-headed sword at the sky. Cleaving Grom in half in midair was his only chance. But the terrifying brilliance of the sword only flashed for a moment before it missed. At that moment he realized that Duque had used an inconspicuous Radiant Moon arcane missile that contained Breaking Dawn magic power to hit the edge of the blade. It was a hair's breadth away. The air was 1,000 miles. The Lord of the Abyss's sword narrowly missed Grom's side. He swung at empty air. The next moment the blood-red axe light flashed and disappeared. She slashed at his chest with all her might. Every ounce of Grom's strength, every drop of his fury as a warrior, was poured into this strike. Moreover, the blade of this terrifyingly powerful legendary weapon had perfectly struck the only weakness on the Lord of the Abyss chest. It wasn't supposed to be a weakness. After being hit by the semi-artifact Hammer of Destruction, it became a weak point. Sal's previous desperate attack was not meaningless. Ah, impossible. The gigantic Lord of the Abyss let out the last painful roar of his life. The violent demonic power contained in his body began to erupt uncontrollably. It was as if a nuclear explosion had occurred. It symbolized complete destruction. It symbolized inevitable death. Thrall, who had just regained his senses, did not even have the time to stand up. He could only watch helplessly as Grom Hellhole, who was both a teacher and a friend, a subordinate, but more like a guardian god, roared and was engulfed by the destructive light of the Abyssal Lord's final self-destruction before his death. Grom, who had just attacked with all his strength, could not escape in time. No, Sal had just gotten up when he was thrown back by the explosion's shockwave. The back of his head hit the rock behind him again. The light was too intense. His eardrums were numb from the shockwave of the explosion. His ears were ringing. No. Sal struggled again. He used his hands and feet to half-crawl and half-leap to the place where Grom had been swallowed by the explosion. But all he saw were a few broken and deformed pieces of armor. Sal's heart instantly sank into a bottomless abyss. He suddenly felt very cold and lonely. That's right. He had great ambitions. He wanted to bring the suffering orcs out of the quagmire of pain and tragedy. But he was too young. Even if he did not want to admit it, he still yearned to learn more from the older heroes. He instinctively chased after the figures of Orgrim and Grom. He had never said it out loud, but he really admired them. Now, Orgrim had died tragically under Arthas, Frostmourne. Now it was Grom's turn? He had sworn that he would never cry again, because the orcs had shed enough tears. At this moment Sal could not help but kneel down and howl at the sky. Grom. No, originally this should have been an incomparably sorrowful scene. Unfortunately, a coarse voice that was barely breathing interrupted this scene. Brat, I'm not dead yet. What are you screaming for? Sal almost doubted his ears. His thick neck was like a rusty axle making creaking sounds. He could not turn for a long time. He did not dare to believe his own senses. But there was indeed an orc panting heavily behind him. With the hope of climbing out of the abyss of despair, Sal finally turned his body step by step and saw the two figures that almost overlapped with each other more than 10 meters behind him. He could not believe it. It was actually Duque supporting Grom Hellscream, who was more than one size bigger than him. The Warsong chief was in an extremely sorry state. His left hand was unnaturally bent, and the green skin of his entire front half was slowly charred black. But he had survived after all. Grom, Duque. Sal was so excited that he was a little incoherent. He could not imagine that at the most critical moment, it was Duque who was originally his mortal enemy who saved one of his two most admired idols, Hellscream. At this moment Duke shouted, "You're so heavy." He threw Grom to the ground like a piece of trash, a look of disdain on his face. "How long has it been since you last bathed?" Looking at the cursing Duque, Grom, who was lying on the ground, laughed. "For your sake I'll learn to bathe like you humans every day if I have the chance." After laughing with great difficulty, Lord Howl's face suddenly darkened. He was indignant. seemed to owe you a life this time. Duque patted the dust off his body and looked at Manarotha's mountainous corpse. You can return it to me on Mount Hyjal, he said calmly. This was not being polite. In the latest intelligence, Duque saw a name that should not have appeared in the historical Battle of Mount Hyjal. Demon Lord Kazakh. Chapter 885. Duque was not sure if Kazakh's soul had completely entered the world of Azeroth. If he was like Archimonde with both his soul and body in this world, then there would be a chance to get rid of the two great demons once and for all. Of course, on the other hand, this also meant a lot of pressure. According to the original history, there were a total of 5 bosses in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, including Archimonde. Even an orc hero with the best stamina would not be able to take it, let alone a human hero with even worse stamina. Duque really did not want this change in history. He could successfully get rid of Kazakh last time because Duque had the support of the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. This time the dragons were obviously premeditated by the Burning Legion. If he really wanted to get rid of Archimonde like in history and let Archimonde's grave next year, Duque would have to put in more effort. Saving Grom Hellscream was Duque's first step. For someone like Lord Howl to die in the hands of a mere Lord of the Abyss, it would be a waste of his talent. If he were to die, he should at least die in the hands of a great demon like the Burning Legion's leader. Yes, first get rid of Archimonde. It would be best if Lord Howl, Thrall, or something perished together with Archimonde, ending the alliance and horde disputes for who knows how many years. That would be perfect. But he was afraid that fate would play tricks on him. Duque really did not dare to compliment the goddess of fate. If she was unhappy and slammed the table saying, "Your alliance already has Lothar the old bastard and the horde needs an old scum," or something, then Duque would be embarrassed. Alright. First get rid of Archimonde, then leave the rest to fate. Back to 2 weeks ago on Mount Hyjal. More than 9,000 years ago, Illidan built a second well of eternity here for his own selfish desires. Later the dragons that survived the cataclysm came to the home of the Night Elves. The red dragon Alexstrasza, the green dragon Isra, and the bronze dragon Nozdormu looked down at the peaceful home of the druids and the fruits grown by the Night Elves. The powerful druid Malfurion welcomed the dragons and told them about the new well of eternity. The dragons were shocked when they heard the terrible news. They thought that as long as the well of eternity existed, the Burning Legion would not give up the idea of conquering this world. Malfurion made a pact with the 3 dragons to ensure the safety of the Well of Eternity and to ensure that the minions of the Burning Legion would never find a way back to this world. The Giver of Life, the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, cast a magical acorn into the center of the Well of Eternity. As soon as the acorn came into contact with the magical lake water, it began to sprout and grow into a giant oak tree. The roots of the tree reached deep into the bottom of the lake, and the huge canopy almost covered the entire sky. This huge oak tree was the eternal symbol of the Night Elves' harmonious relationship with nature. The life energy it emitted could slowly spread and heal the wounds of the entire world. The Night Elves named their world tree Nordrassil, which meant crown of the sky, in the language of the Night Elves. After the 3 dragon aspects bestowed the holy blessing of the dragon race here, this place had always been regarded as the most sacred place by the Night Elves. For more than 9,000 years, this place had been guarded in the strictest manner, and the teachings of druids and other nature teachings had been spread here. 9,000 years of peace had passed just like that. On this day, this sacred place that had never been set foot on by creatures of other races for more than 9,000 years welcomed a strange team. As many as 24 elite guards escorted these few unshackled guests to the front of the temple of the moon goddess Elun. When the envoy, consisting of 2 humans and 2 high elves, arrived at the entrance of the temple, the 2 female temple guards sized them up. They were, of course, Ronan, Bridget, Lilith, and Riadaline, who were here to send a warning to the Night Elves. They were also sizing up these Night Elven guards that had only existed in legends for thousands of years. They weren't wearing long robes, but were instead wearing shiny silver breastplates and pleated skirts. There was a pattern of a crescent moon in the middle of the breastplates. The moon goddess temple was filled with female priestesses. According to the introduction of the Elven Guard captain along the way, most of them could ride and shoot and were proficient in tactics. For example, the leader of the Night Elves and the chosen of the moon goddess Elun, Tyrande Whisperwind, was an excellent archer. After the announcement, the guards signaled for Ronan and the rest to enter. Under the guidance of a priestess in a white robe and a team of 6 guards, Ronan entered the moon goddess temple. As soon as he walked in, Ronan felt the moonlight sprinkling on his body. It was gentle and comfortable, as if the moon goddess had stretched out her soft, motherly hand to caress him. The rectangular room was surrounded by tuberose, and there was a large stone tablet in the middle for the priestess to give a speech. The circular stone path leading to the stone tablet was carved with complicated patterns, all of which were pictures of the waxing and waning of the moon. As he walked along the winding corridor, he found that no matter where the moon was in the sky, the gentle moonlight would always illuminate the entire room. They came to a corner on the 2nd floor that was half surrounded by vines, and the priestess leading the way said softly, "Please wait here." Ronan walked to the center of this small space, and after pacing for a while he heard Bridget say, "You should sit down. It will help you calm down." Ronan sighed and still sat on the stone bench that was probably used by the priestess. The surrounding environment made him feel much more at ease. However, after waiting for a while he still grew impatient. He was even worried that Tyron's leader would be unhappy that they had come so suddenly. However, Ronan, who had no experience as an emissary, could only continue to wait. Finally, an hour later, a tall and slender priestess wearing a moon-white robe with golden embroidery slowly walked into this small world. Night elves were blessed by the Lord of Time, Nozdormu, and had eternal life. As long as they lived through 100 years of infancy, their appearance and physique would be fixed at the perfect youth stage. In front of Ronan was a slender and graceful female elf. Her skin was smooth and delicate, and there was a faint purple tinge to it. Her strange blue hair had a few strands of silver in it, and her exquisite face was very feminine even in the eyes of humans and high elves. "Hello. I am Tyrant Whisperwind." The priestess spoke in ancient elven language. Chapter 886. Elven language was something that high-ranked human wizards could not avoid. Moreover, Duque had instructed Ronan to cram on the ancient elven language and etiquette for this trip. Be it the Dalajan or Stormwind City, these things were lacking. But this was not important. The high elves still had a lot of inheritances. Ronan performed an ancient ritual that he had practiced hundreds of times on the journey from the ship to Theramore and then to Azhara. "Greetings, Your Excellency Tyrant Whisperwind. I'm Ronan from the Eastern Kingdom on the other side of the Endless Ocean. I'm a messenger from an alliance of humans, high elves, dwarves, and pygmies." "Greetings, Mr. Ronan." It could be seen that Tyrant was very satisfied with Ronan's practice of night elven etiquette. Regardless of orthodoxy or standards, for a temporary emissary to be able to practice to this extent showed that he had truly put in a lot of effort. Everything should have been perfect and the host and guest should have enjoyed themselves. But in the next moment, Tyrant seemed to have noticed something. He seemed to be a little uncertain. After widening her almond-shaped eyes, she once again focused on Ronan's chest. To be more precise, Tyrant was looking at the emblem of the Marcus family on Ronan's chest. After all, from a diplomatic point of view, it was rather rude to stare at something that belonged to someone else. But Tyrant could not control herself, even muttering to herself, "Impossible. So long ago." Ronan said awkwardly, "Your Excellency Whisperwind, is there something wrong with my emblem? In fact, this is the emblem of my master, Marcus." "Marcus, no." Tyrant bowed slightly. "My apologies, it reminded me of something from ancient times. The emblem that your master passed on to you is very similar to that of an acquaintance of mine from a long, long time ago." "Was that so?" Ronan could only continue speaking. Tyrant seemed to be very concerned about it. Because elves had rather long eyebrows, the slightest twitch of the muscles between the eyebrows was very obvious. "If I may be so bold as to ask, how many years has your master's legacy been passed down? Is it 10,000 years? This question was very strange and Ronan's question was very abrupt. With regards to Duque's master's inheritance, Luo Ning was also dumbfounded. He only knew that the only master Duque had personally acknowledged was hundred-handed death god Wuxia. The problem was that it had been close to 15 years since the last person to receive the title of master teacher. If Tyrant had asked if it had been 100 years, Ronan would not have dared to answer. But 10,000 years. Ronan laughed. "I'm sorry, but humans don't have such a long history as the night elves." 2,800 years ago, when great Emperor Saladin united all the human clans, a kingdom and a more systematic civilization appeared. Even before that, humans were a relatively primitive clan. The earliest recorded human civilization could only be traced back to 4,000 years ago. 10,000 years? That's impossible. I see. Tyrant could not hide the disappointment on her face, but she quickly regained her composure as the high priestess of the moon goddess. My apologies again, I've gone off topic. May I ask, emissary of the Alliance, why are you here? In order to prevent the Burning Legion from invading the Kalimdor continent and the world tree of Hyjal Nordrassil, I've sent a warning to the night elves. Saying this, Ronan opened his palm. The crystal that could record images projected the scene of Archimonde descending upon Azeroth and destroying the Dalajan. Tyrant's expression froze. The blue light that represented the moon goddess Elune rapidly gathered in her almond-shaped eyes, almost filling up her entire eye sockets. Only by braving the holy light to look at her would one see that her pupils were surrounded by the white of her eyes, looking like azure glass beads. As expected, what I saw in the dream is true. Tyrant's voice was more like a murmur. She thought of the nightmares that had frequently appeared in her dreams over the past month. In the past, whenever she fell asleep and entered a dream, her soul would float up into the sky with Elune's blessing. But recently she found that her soul could not escape the shackles of the earth, and could only wander around under the clouds. The more she flew down, the closer she got to the moon goddess palace, and the more terrifying scenes appeared in her vision. Mount Hyjal could see them more clearly. The world tree Nordrassil was like this, and the well of eternity was the same. In the well that looked like a large lake, black water swirled wildly and colorful lake water rolled out from the bottom of the river. It was extremely terrifying. As the huge waves from the lake crashed onto the shore, the powerful magical energy contained in the water of the well of eternity dissipated in all directions. The lake water churned like boiling water. Countless night elf priests and druids prostrated themselves beside the well, praying. But the more they prayed for the well of eternity's forgiveness, the worse it became. In the sky, torrential rain poured down and thunder and lightning roared. The beautiful houses near the well of eternity were about to be washed away by the lake water. Why was this happening? What happened to the well of eternity? In her hazy dream, Tyrant felt strange and frightened more than once. She turned to look outside Mount Hyjal. The sky was already as dark as the night of Mount Hyjal. No, it was even darker. The thick black hue only made Tyrant feel that something bad was about to happen. This was really abnormal and there was definitely danger. What were the sentries in the clan doing? Her soul flew over the mountain path of Mount Hyjal, and she saw that the guards on the path were silent, unable to see her at all. Or was this just a simple dream of hers? She floated to the periphery of the buildings on the mountain top, and was about to go out and see what was going on. She had thought that she could easily pass through the magical barrier around the mountain top, but she encountered an obstacle. Someone had already cast a very complicated and powerful magical incantation around Mount Hyjal, blocking the extension of her senses and preventing her from exploring everything in the outside world. This made her feel like a baby bird waiting to be born in an egg, but she had no idea whether there was a ferocious predatory beast outside that wanted to smash and destroy her, or break the eggshell and drag her out to be devoured. This unknown terror made her very uneasy. But she could not pass through this mysterious and evil magic. Every time she tried, she would feel an unexpected pain. She could not cry out. This pain was not something that could be solved with a few screams. Every time the dream reached this point, all the images would disappear just like that. When she woke up, she found herself once again in the pure and flawless world of the Moon Maiden Temple. She was the high priestess of the moon goddess, as well as the leader of the entire night elf race, even if she had an ominous premonition in her dreams. Even though there was an ominous foreboding in the dream, she could not make any big moves with just this alone, until she saw Archimonde's image. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.